There you go.
Okay. All right. So we are.
And now it's real.
3 seconds. It's setting up the meeting, and then we will be good to go. So, here we are. We're ready.
Sweet.
Okay.
Well, I guess should I get back into the zone? Should
Right.
I?
No more insider stuff.
Okay. Well, guys. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Supplement Industry Roundtable. I'm Jacob with Justin Hall and Mr. Ben Kane. And today we are joined by none other than Tim Gritzman from Natural Body Inc. How's it going, Tim?
Hey guys, happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you, man.
It's been weird because it seems like months ago when we did this with Dan, doesn't it? It's been forever.
14 days.
It's been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Quarantine has made things really just feel slow. Like every day feels like 3 of them.
I never know what day it is, but you guys do you three weekly, and then the guest seat rotates, right?
Well, it's bi-weekly, isn't it?
Well, we tried to do it every 2 weeks, and then the Glaxon thing kind of threw that off because then we started. We could do this every day, but we're trying to not do it too much because we all kind of have other things to do too. So we don't want to start messing that up, and it's becoming very difficult to do it every 2 weeks. So.
Oh yeah.
Can't say bi-weekly because it means 2 things and people get tied up, by the way.
See? We're going already.
This is okay. Because it can mean twice a week and then people will hold you to that.
You're right. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I'm notorious for that. I'll take a meaning and I'll run with it, and then I realize that I've been saying the term wrong the whole time. And then I'm just like, oh, well, okay. But
well, let's get an intro for Tim. Tim actually has been live on YouTube before. Tim, I don't know if you remember this, but years ago at the Natural Body Nutrio Natural Line launch, we did this. Clearly, we're doing this a little bit higher scale now. So, Tim, you have a long history in the industry that people probably don't even know about. You touched on that a little bit pre-podcast, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So, if you could tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got to where you are now, we can kick it off.
Yeah, sure. So I sort of assume because I have so many touch points with Justin's guys that I'm already sort of integrated, but I sort of backed my way into supplements. I remember taking a part-time job just after college at GNC, and then sort of getting promoted almost against my will. There was just such terrible managers, and they kept pressuring me, and I was trying to go to school. And that sounds like a humble brag, but I don't really mean it that way. I was kept turning it down. But ultimately, it was right place, right time, confluence, a bunch of factors. I ended up running a bunch of GNCs. I'm originally from Illinois. I was able to parlay that into a sales job, going to the wholesale side, business to business for iForce Nutrition, which actually took me out of the Midwest into Connecticut. That was about 10 years ago. I sort of kicked around with that job for a year and a half. It was cool. It was allowed me to see the industry from a different perspective for sure. So I'd been on the corporate retail side. Then I went to the wholesale side. That allowed me to interface with distributors too. Obviously, iForce wasn't their own manufacturer, but then again, there were touch points with manufacturers. So I started to dip my toes into other ends of the industry and really kind of realized though retail was my passion. And ironically, what brought me to New York, which is where I reside now, and if you guys, Jacob was nice enough to nail the intro, but we have 5 brick and mortar retail stores and a website in New York. My business partner now, he's actually the ultimate and original owner of Natural Body. Started it 20 years ago, had the one store, had the website, was my account. So I lived in Connecticut. Steve was my biggest account in New York. I used to sell supplements to Steve wholesale, and we became good friends. I was actually, ironically, was leaving iForce to go work for GNC Corporate. I had left on good terms with them. My name was sort of still good and fungible and rehirable there. And I pretty much had the job in hand. I was in the 3rd interview. I had an in, my good friend Carter, may or may not see this, but he was currently working at GNC Corporate on the sports team at the time. It sort of greased the wheels for me. And then I told Steve, hey, I'm leaving. He was like, hey, you should come work for me. And I was like, what would that look like? Thought he was kidding. He's like, I'm serious. I'm buying out my partner, and it just, the more we talked, the more it seemed like a cool idea. That was about 8 years ago. I moved to Queens on sort of it's funny. I spurned the guaranteed good job, quote unquote, which turned out to be a great idea because shortly thereafter, GNC Corporate turned over their teams and their CEOs numerous times. So I really did dodge a bullet, but I sort of defied the conventional bird in the hand versus 2 in the bush advice. I took the gamble, and it was a great decision. And it got me closer to, the end consumers again, which I think was more in line with both my skill set and my passion. But again, I have a super cool job. I'm very lucky because I get to interface with folks like you and brands, and I sort of vet and curate brands. And the whole reason why I took that job, and I'll wrap this up, was that I felt like I could go to GNC corporate and maybe make more money and have an easier job, but I really I wouldn't have like an impact on the industry. And I felt like at Natural Body, it was maybe more leverage to, dent the industry even a tiny bit. So it was like a platform that I ultimately built here, but like I wanted to be like a decision maker somewhere and have more of an input. And again, it turned out to be a wonderful decision. Part of that is credit to Steve. Part of it was right place, right time. And I'm really happy I did it. So that's the long story short.
So when you said 8 years ago, so how many locations did Natural Body Inc. like have at the time? And I guess like as a second part to that is, could you have sort of foreseen this? I mean, 5 locations and kind of as crazy as it is now.
Yeah. So to his credit, Steve, like sort of the way it was sold to me was he was buying out his partner, who is a good guy, but they had different like visions for it. And he was like, look, Queens is always going to be mine. That was the main store. That was the one store. And it was actually an 800 square foot spot. I remember being just floored when I would call on him that like you couldn't fit 6 people like sardines in a tin in that store. And I would like, and then he would tell me like what it would do. And I was like, what? Like, so I was like, oh, it's because Queens. But then I would go to other accounts. So I was like, So I really realized he had something special. And again, it would have been sort of narcissistic and like greedy for me to try to claw some of that original business away from him or like buy in or something. That was his baby. So the tacit arrangement we had was I could help him. I could bring some of my corporate experience from GNC and help him scale. I mean, there were versions of the world where you would like place an order with like a legal pad and like the warehouse was down the block, and like we helped to systematize things and formalize things and give it some operational muscle, or I helped. And so again, the upside though of that agreement was that if we opened subsequent stores, I would be allowed to partner with him. And he's a man of his word. That's been like sort of the letter of our agreement, and we were able to open 4 since then, more or less on every other year, sort of. I don't want to say biannually, but
that's awesome. That's awesome. No, yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's what's crazy is I think a lot of times you'll see, we talk about this all the time about, you see collaborations or you see people are like, hey, let's start this cool idea together. Let's be business partners. And it's like the worst idea ever because it sounds cool, right? So 8 years is a long time to be partners with someone and to get it to, I mean, it's like a marriage, right? So if you can get it to last that long, Steve and you sort of have different dynamics with how you say, would you say that's sort of the key to this? Because like I said, we just see it all the time where people just want to like do stuff together and you're just like, you just got to slow down. Like it's going to end in disaster. Like I guarantee it.
Yeah. So the joke is, and you said marriage, that's probably a good word. The joke is that I probably know him as well as anyone except for his wife, or very close to it. So I think here's a couple things that definitely helped us. We weren't like childhood friends. We had a great working relationship though when I was his sales rep. So I kind of understood a little bit about the way he liked to conduct business, and I respected it. But we're 10 years apart. So he's 10 years older than me, and it could go the other way. It's just, I think it's important. That's, I think, number one. And we weren't childhood friends. We didn't bring like baggage necessarily into the partnership. I think people think that like, because they can go out and grab a beer, have a meal together, that is like a good conducive business arrangement. And maybe you want to pass what is it? Google calls like that the airport test, where like, hey, the candidate checks out on paper, but if you got stuck in an airport with them, could you have a beer with them and not like want to go somewhere else and make any excuse to get out? So that, and then also like, I think we have a pretty good, it's not necessarily verbalized, maybe when it needs to be, but unspoken agreement that like, he does what he's really good at, I do what I'm really good at, and we more or less stay out of each other's way. Like, I can sort of try to call him on whatever, and the same for me. But then even if he's telling me like, I don't agree with that, or I think we should go a different direction, he's not then trying to do my job, and vice versa. And I think that's where I see a lot of partners butt heads. It's like, oh, I can do it better. And then there's like, there's no, again, verbalized or not agreement on like whose stuff is what. So if you stay out of each other's sandboxes, I think it tends to be less, heavy fire between the parties.
You actually have an interview from the block party earlier this year where you guys were joking about how like one of you, Steve will come up with like this crazy idea and you'll kind of like pop your head out of the office and be like, no. That's not a good idea. And it's just like understood. Like if it's a marketing thing, like Tim goes. But I think Dan had a really good point those 2 weeks ago. He talked a lot about how like it all has to do with who you go to war with. And you have to know the people that you are working with. And I had a very, very similar situation. I worked with Mike at Price Lab when I was at NutriBrass, so I understood a lot of their business model before going in. You don't have to be friends with someone to be very close with them and understand the way they think business-wise. So I completely understand that.
Yeah, it reminds me of like in college, doing group projects, especially like there's always that one entrepreneurial mind in the group project who's going to just take over and do it on their own. But if you have a partnership where you both know your strengths and you both know what you're doing and you designate roles, like that's bliss. I think.
Look, Steve came to my wedding. I've gone to his kids' baptisms and communions. It's like we are friends, but
right.
I think it's partly because, and one of you said too, like I'm a Midwestern transplant to the East Coast. He's like a dyed-in-the-wool Queens native. We have different sort of trajectories that, like, if the more similar the two people are, sometimes that I think that can backfire.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I see that.
Yeah, especially if you have like similar skill sets, because then you're like, well, what are we doing here? No one's bringing anything new sort of to the table, so you're just doing the same job, and that's when the whole I can do it better kind of thing comes into play. And it's like, all right, we don't really need two people doing this.
Yeah. I think that's a huge mistake made in a lot of teams, is having like multiple like marketers in the same team, and they have different styles, or multiple sales reps at the same level that have different styles or like distribution thoughts, and it becomes a pissing match of what you can do better.
Yeah.
So what was the so when you were working for the brand, what was, because you mentioned you were sort of familiar with Steve, like how was your relationship then, I guess? How closely did you work with him?
It was good enough that I wanted to take him out to dinner to tell him I was leaving. Because one thing, Steve, and this is funny, like 8 years have gone by before we went live. We were kind of joking about good sales reps, bad sales reps. One thing that Steve has always disliked, and I think is very endemic to our industry, is like the rep merry-go-round, where like you get a call from a brand. It's like, hey, I'm your new sales rep. And, we don't really like the other guy was doing things. We're here to fix all these problems. And it's like, then like, it's like, we'll give it 6 months and see if you're still in the seat before we. So I was like, look, I was in a weird spot because iForce was later sold to High-Tech. It's part of the High-Tech family of brands now. But at the time, it was just like a sort of one-man shop run by this guy named Dave Nelson, who I respect Dave. Dave was a tough boss, is very particular in his methods. But he ran an effective company. And it's funny. I did gloss over one thing. I don't know if people find it interesting or not. Before I worked for GNC, I worked for the supplement store that I used to buy my supplements from in Chicago. I'll give them a shout out. They're always fair with me and straight with me. But it's Capital Nutrition, it's called, for the brick and mortar arm. And then the online presence is Best Price Nutrition. So I worked for them, and I'm only bringing this up because I was a longtime admirer of Hemavol, which is iForce's really darling, before I even worked for iForce or GNC. Best Price used to buy Hemavol, and I did like a blog post about it in like 2010 or 8 or something, about how it was so unconventional, because it was one of the first products to invert that category of arginine, was the de facto pump ingredient. And, now that would be the minority opinion, and citrulline, and agmatine are sort of the dominant, and that would be like the standard orthodox. But back then it was completely unheard of. And so it was funny, permit me the small world story, that I ended up working for this company that happened to sell the thing that I was so fond of. When I, in some ways that was, I would say iForce, if you had to sort of encapsulate their pros and cons as a company, is they were really, people would be like, trade show, Hemavol, right? And I'd be like, yeah, iForce. And they're like, Hemavol, I got it, But for better or worse, that was like our golden goose.
What was for people that don't know, what was the Hemavol? What was the formula and innovation there?
So it had that 4-ingredient backbone that we see everywhere now. So in many ways it was ahead of its time, but it was citrulline, agmatine, glycerol, and it had epimedium for Icarian, but there's one I'm missing here. It's gonna drive me nuts. Of course, on the spot. I've done this on the fly by 47 times, but
yeah. So did you? I don't want to get you off track too far, but so being that your role within the company, and now you're trying to sell a product that sort of bucks a lot of the trends, making your job more difficult. As we always talk about, like in this industry, like a lot of us are like, oh, we want to see some innovation, but then at another time it's like, well, people have to be receptive to the innovation all the way down the chain in order to like push some of this stuff through. So sometimes we sort of just fall back into what's comfortable and what people will continue to buy, because it's like, well, then I got to convince the retailers to pick it up, and then the retailers got to convince the consumers to pick it up. So I was kind of curious, like how that dynamic worked, where you're sort of trying to push something that may be a little outside the box.
So brief sidebar, Norvaline is the fourth, which, you know, I know it went through that like brief controversial period, but I still think
that I still hear about.
Yeah. One study, but it's like the old man builds 10 bridges and you can't finish that second part of that saying, but it's always the second thing.
Yeah.
Maybe you can. I don't know. I'll get, you know, I'll have my, what is that called? The C4 thing. We'll get, or do you guys drink on this?
We'll drink a decent amount of this.
Sometimes.
With the Access Slush guys, we did.
Yeah, I thought I saw one where, I know with Dan you did the energy drinks, but there was like bourbon or whiskey in one of them, right?
Access Sledge.
That was Access Sledge.
Yeah. So we got in a lot of trouble for that one.
That one, yeah.
All right, so you guys, those of you who know how that saying ends, Norvaline has one bad study, and it's not even, you know, it's a in vitro study, and it gets completely taken out of read out of proportion or whatever, but or out of context. But regardless, back to your question, Justin. It's a good one. I'm proud of a couple innovations. I fortunately had 2 flavors of Hemavol at the time, which I found was criminal. So the first thing I did at the company was beg Dave. Like, we would get placement on lemon and watermelon. Okay. So then it was like, how do you teach a store? Because my whole thing was like, I was super dangerous in person. I loved going to the stores and talking to the people. There's a fun sidebar here. And because they've become such a juggernaut, I'll tell the story in a second. I got thrown out of supplement superstores in St. Louis, which we all laugh about, including Sal and Andy. So I can tell the story, but because I was good at building rapport with the managers. But I would try to teach them, like, look, man, at the time, obviously everything was still 1-3 and dominated by stims, and, you know, DMAA could sort of be like the anti-pump. So an easy like way to help them run a profitable retail store, get their customers more results, you know, build their baskets and get customers coming back and saying thank you for the advice, was to add Hemavol to a pump or a stim pre-workout. I had watermelon and lemon. So what do you do if the guy's buying grape or cotton candy? You know, you come up with these really weird concoctions. So we immediately doubled our flavors, and then we rolled out an unflavored. And that became a lot easier to get placement, because, you know, anymore, if people have a hot product, what like the standard move in our industry is let's make 8 flavors. Now you can extend that like ad absurdum, where the retailer can't keep up with 10 flavors, the website can't keep up with 10 flavors. You know, you sort of line extend till your eyes bleed. But at the time, going from 2 to 4 and then adding an unflavored really sort of opened that up. I just think, Justin, the industry was so nascent, and specialty was very dominant back then and had a bigger seat at the table, I think, in terms of like the demand would start in specialty and then trickle down into bodybuilding.com and big box retail. Mm-hmm. And it more or less does that now, but it used to be a lot more driven grassroots. But also people were like there was, and this, it's crazy to say again, I almost hate telling these stories because it makes our industry look bad, but there were so many pro hormones. It was like pre-SARM days, but there was like so many ways for retailers to make money hand over fist, easy money, that like people weren't thinking about how to build a basket with a stim-free pump powder. But like, I also don't think that's like a bad conversation to have, because like, again, I apply my consumer litmus test. Is like, if you took stim-free pump products away from me as a consumer, but also as an employee in the industry, I would be very mad. I would be upset. So, you know, but teaching stores how to do this and how to get customer sustainable results and build fun stacks and everything, that was always the fun part for me. So I had a lot of fun with it, but also, like, again, I'm willing to acknowledge the element of luck and the fact that like I wasn't selling the 17th DMA. I mean, we had Max Intense,
right?
But Hemavol was more or less on an island. It was very unlike something else they were carrying. And then, you know, slowly but surely, a lot of people fell in line. But still, at the time, in the beginning, it was kind of a unicorn in that category.
And you got thrown out of supplement superstores?
That's what we want to hear about.
You guys know they're like a retail juggernaut in St. Louis and like southern Illinois. And I was going in and asking like fact-finding questions and like, hey, I noticed you guys sell a lot of, you guys maybe have to help me, or maybe I'm the best person to answer, but there used to be an All Max pre-workout that was like DMAA or high stim. That was like their top mover at the time. I can't remember the name of it.
Well, what came before Impact? Because they went through a brief period where it was like nothing other than their like low stim pre.
The only thing I can come up with is H-Ball, and it's clearly, I mean, in fact, H-Ball named, here you go, Justin. H-Ball was named after Hemavol.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
For life, me can't think of the Razor 8. There you go.
Oh, I remember Razor 8.
Yeah,
Razor 8 went so many reformulations.
Yeah.
And at the time, they had first formed sort of as a house brand, but they didn't have like, it was protein. It was it,
Right.
So like I would talk to the managers, and I was, hey, why do you guys sell so much of that? Is it margin? Is it demand? Is it you're trying to get your customers the best results? Is it you get kickback? Whatever. Dumb questions. Just trying to, hey, I come from the industry. Let me help you. And they, I guess, had like an all hands meeting, and they weren't getting their stuff done. Andy was like, why, what's stopping you guys? And some manager like sheepishly raised his hand, is like, the iForce guy is here for like 2 hours. And,
That's amazing.
and he's like, what? So then there was like a pass down from the ivory tower. It was like a no rep rule. And it's still to this day, like they just are like, and you can't really, the decision maker is not in the store anyhow. So that was more about me trying to get the products out the door or whatever, just like how to come up with a game plan to even get in. But it was, so then like, to just show you small industry, friend of a friend, like Sal made a couple of phone calls to people that knew me. And it turned out that like, I was like an okay guy or whatever he heard. So then like, he told his brother, like, look, the kid's just trying to do his job. Like it wasn't his fault. Like the manager probably is exaggerating. Cause like, I wouldn't waste their time too. I always tried not to be a bad rep because I had been the recipient of the reps. So I knew what a bad, courteous or whatever, like I knew how to not be annoying and stay out of their way.
You're like the Tom Brady of the supplements. You got a rule named after you. Like the supplement superstores has the Tim Gritzman rule. Like no.
Kind of, yeah. Well, I don't know if that makes me Brady, but
that's amazing.
Impressive.
But people. It's funny because like, I know that brand sometimes is evocative of polarizing opinions, and I get it. I totally get it. They have an interesting business model. As a retailer, I can't list it on my own website, so I understand sort of the pain points too. But I also knew them then, not as well as I do now, but it's been cool to watch them like ride the rocket ship up or whatever. So I also saw, like, I can remember when Aaron Singerman asked us for his business when he was with Blackstone. Like, so it's been interesting to watch these brands change teams and grow up and change their strategy and everything. Just people come into this crazy ride at different spots. But if you've been doing it for a while, it's been fun to see the industry change over time.
I came into this industry like right after the fall of distribution and like the old guard of like the old boys club and stuff. And I find it really interesting because people always spoke to me like, the fun days of Europa and Lone Star and those days back then. I think it's really interesting because you kind of existed like in that transition. Like I really, like, you watched Aaron go to Redcon. You really kind of were in the trenches of that. And I think you got a lot of good stories. Like over the years, I will say
I missed all the crazy Olympia parties. I've only been to like one or two. I get, they blur together, but most of it was like building the booth or whatever. But like people tell these like barn burner, like, you don't understand. And I was never there then. I did kind of see sort of the hole in the model of distribution, and I watched that play out. And I think that's probably a net force for good. I know, Ben, one thing I think you guys do really well, and you in particular, you often said like you're an advocate for consumers, something I agree with and try to be as much as I can as a retailer. But like, distributors are often a net bad for the consumer because it's another hand in the cookie jar in the supply chain. And it's like in any other industry, like in my dad's world, my dad works for Pepsi. Okay. The distributor is just that. They're a logistics company. They move products from A to B. There's not a sales rep in the middle that takes 10% commission home. That's crazy.
Or fee to be in the front of their book. Right.
And that's the inefficiency that the internet is ironing out. I think that's why it was the first thing to fall out of the machine. I
think that this whole e-commerce era is giving a really even playing field. Like, because anyone can learn digital advertising at home. Anyone can learn Shopify. It's really just how much do you want to know. So we kind of got a lot of the story, but you arrive at Natural Body, and then we kind of cut to like the beauty of working with Steve Calabrese. But how many stores did you have when you got there, and like how was that a challenge for you? Like at what point did you find your spot in Natural Body? Like how did that go?
So yeah, we tried a lot of things. It's funny, like there's maybe one story that's like emblematic of how crazy it was. But I told you we had an 800 square foot store on a very busy, it's Cross Bay. Those of you who've been to Block Party, that's the same. And if you follow Cross Bay North, it turns into Woodhaven. That basically cuts Queens in the middle. So it runs from the north end of Queens all the way to the south end of Queens. But so we're on more or less the biggest boulevard in Queens, at least north-south running. And there's probably 100,000 cars that drive past our store every day. So we always had that advantage. And then the 800 square feet thing was just like, you watch like Shark Tank or something and they'll say like, oh, revenue per square foot. I mean, if I've ever seen anything like that, I just always thought his store was so cool because it was so different than like, when I came from the Midwest, it was all like strip center stores.
Yeah.
And you guys have been to the Block Party. Just imagine a smaller version of that down the block though. The amount of people in the surrounding community and the amount of cars, the amount of foot traffic is very different than what I was used to. So I had the one store, obviously, that's it. And actually, we rented a warehouse, maybe 10 doors in about a city block down the block. And we used to have to manually cart products from the warehouse down to the store. And,
So cool.
When I say the story that was emblematic of how small of a shop it was, the first year I joined him, his web store did like, I remember looking and it was like, I don't think it's any problem that I share this because we've obviously come a long way, but it's like $144,000 in the whole year. So it's about 12 grand a month or less than 500 a day. That was the online business. So it was extremely nascent. It was mostly like Google AdWords and Oxy Elite Pro. It was more or less, I mean, you could like sell a life raft to a drowning man. That was Oxy Elite Pro in 2013. So one thing that was big was we started looking for a location that would get rid of the need for the warehouse. So the Megastore came around in 2015. Before the Megastore, we were able to open what's now referred to as Natural Body Brooklyn. There's a lot of interesting backstory here. I kind of consider Steve like the godfather of supplements in New York, because even some of the other players were stores that had once either kicked the tires to be a Natural Body franchise or actually were at one point before he had formalized his, we don't have franchises anymore, but I would say that in his growing pains that predated me, he had, with the best of intentions, tried to put some people in business as arms of Natural Body. And they had, I'm not saying they were bad actors either. It was probably just one of those situations like you were talking about, Justin, with like partnerships and everything, where it's like people enter the best of intentions and then realize they're further apart than they thought. But people know Fakri Mubarak, the bodybuilding coach, who we both respect, and any sort of whatever between Steve and him has long since passed, and they're friendly. But NXT Sports Nutrition, I think one location is still operational. That was originally Natural Body Queens. The Natural Body Brooklyn was owned by another IFBB pro bodybuilder, Dominic Cardone, and his dad, and his old business partner, Mike Jarovic, to connect the dots, is the guy who now owns Condemned Labs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Michael. Yeah.
Yeah. So another good guy, Brooklyn guy. They wanted out of the retail business. So that one was kind of deposited in our lap. That's probably more of a testament to Steve being like a long-standing good guy, but we were able to buy that from them. That became Natural Body Brooklyn. That was 2014. 2015, we hit my first like big, what I saw as a major operational windfall, which was to get the warehouse and the customer service staff and the offices, if you will, and the retail store under the same roof with a back lift gate, which sounds ridiculous that we didn't have one before, but in Queens can be a bit more difficult to come by. So now this completely unkinked our operational workflow, where products would come in the back, they could get processed and sub-distributed if needed, or merchandised in the front of the store, whatever, all under the same roof. We no longer needed to go up and down the block, and however crazy that was. So it was a major like efficiency win. And then this started turning like the flywheel, I think, a little bit. cash flow got better, operations got better. The next store, again, that was deposited in our lap, used to belong to IFBB Pro John De La Rosa.
Mhm.
So that was Natural by New Rochelle. I appreciate the fact that you guys are giving me some credit here, and I'll take some, but some of it, again, was reputation, right place, right time. And again, the operational advantage, like I said, turning the flywheel of just getting more efficient, getting better cash flow, managing our inventory, and then these opportunities tend to sprout up. So we were able to take over that store with John's largesse. He was with us for some time, and then he really wanted to double down on, he stayed on board as a minority partner, but then wanted to pursue bodybuilding at like a very vigorous level. He was doing those trips to like Kuwait and everything. So ultimately approached us and wanted to be bought out completely, which we
It's
did.
rather recent, right? Like a couple years ago.
Yeah, this was after it has to be after 2015.
Right.
We had opened the store. We announced at the mega store grand opening that John was going to be partnering with us. So Natural by New Rochelle opened. So I said it's pretty much every other year. Like 2014 was Brooklyn, 2016 was New Rochelle, and then 2017 I think 17, we opened a second store in Brooklyn, which we now refer to as Natural Body Bay Ridge. In hindsight, calling the first one Natural Body Brooklyn was a little short-sighted because now we have 2 stores in Brooklyn. And then, okay, so just I don't want to get bogged down in the weeds and super detail oriented. We can go as granular or not as the people want.
Go ahead, go for it.
I'm just sitting here learning, man.
Yeah.
Well, so the one that like we opened completely scot-free, was never anyone else's business, was never, actually was a virgin space. It never had a tenant before, is the store I'm actually sitting in right now. I didn't want to attempt a white knuckle drive home to get home. So I just set up shop here. I'm not a Miami Dolphins fan. That's Steve. But this is Natural Body Belmore. So this is Long Island.
Okay.
So now we're in 3 of, well, if we count New Rochelle as the Bronx, it's close. We're in 3 of the 5 boroughs. We're not in Manhattan or Staten Island, but New York City is comprised of 5 boroughs, and then Long Island sort of attaches to Queens. Again, before me, Steve had a store in Patchogue, just further out in Long Island, that ultimately became more of like an eatery, and they went their separate ways. Again, amicable. I don't even want to attempt to explain that further because, again, it's before me, but it was always kind of like unfinished business that we wanted to come back out here. So I'd say this is a store we did the best with. It has I'd say most like of our aesthetic. It has exposed ceiling. It has a future juice bar location. It has, the shelving that's very, like, sort of, you guys have seen the mega store, like all that. We nailed it for the first time in what I call a satellite store, which is just a holdover from, I think, what GNC or Capital used to call it, but an external store, external to our warehouse. So this was the first one, which is last year, that we actually opened, not that was a handoff from a previous Natural Body franchisee or anything that we bought someone else's business. This was the first one that was just our concept start to finish. And I honestly think it's in my heyday with GNC, I was overseeing 29 stores. That is a completely different job than I have now. But I also think in some ways that business model is outdated. It might be untenable in New York. And I think retail has fundamentally changed since then. I don't know. There might be a version of the world where we consider something like 6 or 7 or maybe 10. I'm still relatively young. The model seems to work. But on the other hand, I think there's something to be said about small giants and becoming fixtures in the community and having 5 stores that do, X per day rather than 10 stores that do X divided by 3 per day and just spreading the same pie more thin. Mm-hmm. And actually where we see the most growth is online anyhow. So, we're sort of chasing the growth right now. Although one thing I'm adamant about, and Jacob, you might like this as a fellow retailer, and I think your business model is really cool, is that I'm constantly trying to reinforce to our customers that whatever you can do online, you can do in a store. So think of the stores as convenience outposts for your shopping. If it is more convenient for you to come to the store, then by all means. Otherwise, feel free to. We're flattered if you patronize our website. People will ask me, well, how could your store ever be more convenient than Amazon? Well, there's 100,000 cars that drive past it every day. Now, again, it's a claim you can make in Queens, but Amazon 2-day delivery, maybe even experimenting with same-day delivery, but that comes with a surcharge in most cases, at least for same day. But if you're driving past me already, and So there are some convenience gains that can be had, I think, in a densely populated metropolitan area like New York that maybe aren't so true elsewhere in the country. But, if we're the recipient of that, New York has its own suite of problems that come with it as well. So it's a mixed bag.
Well, yeah, I mean, and not just convenience, but also the experience that you gain from working with, with a quality retailer, I think is unparamount to just clicking add to cart on a website. But maybe that's just that's the way I've always seen things. It's totally a different ball game when you get that one-on-one interaction.
I want that for everyone, right? Like yeah. You and I know, like, I don't think it comes from a place of arrogance. It comes from genuine care. Like, yeah. I think if you'll talk to me or my team, we can help you accomplish more than maybe you would have already. But yeah, that requires a couple, trust investments and everything. And there is a certain type of customer that just is they've made their decision. And yeah. I'm also flattered in that case that they're willing to purchase from me if they were going to purchase it anyhow. You know what I mean? Like we're probably of the same mind on this, but those customers are almost two different types of customers. And maybe sometimes you can take one and make them into the other.
Yep. That's always my goal. Like that's the fun challenge for me when a customer comes in, hard set on one thing only, and I have to kind of sit back and like let my ego calm down a little bit. I'm like, look, they're trusting me to at least shop with me. They're coming here and trusting us and buying from us. But, at the same token, I always try to like work on that person a little bit harder than somebody else who's already an open book to kind of, get them to expand their horizons a little bit. Because a lot of people are just dead set on one thing.
Yeah. And like you said, like I have to zoom out and be like, they could have bought this anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
The store. So
that's a good way of looking at it.
It's flattering that you know what I mean? Like, I think it's like Jocko Willink says, like, there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. Like there's no bad sales, only like maybe misapplications. Right. But like, if you're in the store, I couldn't possibly fathom being upset with you. That's more of a holdover and not something I'm saying that happens in your place or anything. In GNC, they have such like an aggressive sales culture that they're taught like, well, this is a bad transaction. This would be a good transaction. Right. I sort of reject that whole paradigm, as you probably do as well. Like they're in the store. They could have gone 1,000 other places, but they chose to shop with you. GNC had this ill-conceived initiative for a while that we had to answer the phone. We had to say, thank you for choosing GNC. This is Tim, how can I help you? And they were emphatic that because it is a choice. That is the part I agreed with. It was a little awkward and cringy to have to say the phone because people are like, what? Like, hi. And oh yeah, can I finish my spiel? But the choice part is the correct sort of philosophical way to look at that.
Yeah. There's something that I remember, Tim, I heard you say a while ago that sort of stuck with me because actually Ben and I sort of talk about this and Jacob and I sort of talk about this like separately, but you mentioned about sort of changing your viewpoint on what you were just talking about, where maybe at one point in time, you're like, no, you have to take the one with the full dose of citrulline and no, don't put that one down. Like, whereas now you sort of change. And because I've done the same thing. And I know Ben, like we've talked about this where you're trying to like steer, but at the same time, it's like, not everyone's sort of ready for that, whatever you're about to say. But anyway, what I was going to say was something that always stuck in my head was you mentioned about changing that mindset of yours where you had the answer and you were going to give it to him. Now all of a sudden you're like, let's have sort of a working relationship about this conversation because this is going to be hopefully a 20-year conversation between the two of us kind of thing.
So I try, yeah. So lifetime value, I think, is the right way to think about consumers. It's like a gun. This might be controversial. I don't think so. Guns can be used for good or evil.
We're conservative.
At some point, you could.
Yeah, I was gonna say you don't have to worry about that.
Well, at some point, you can become so adept at what we're doing, and maybe persuasive, or maybe someone is not super assertive, and you can just sort of like I've watched adroit GNC employees steamroll people into like $200 worth of shit. Problem is that person's going home and they're going to regret it. They don't know. They don't have a plan. They don't have a lifeline. They're going to have buyer's remorse. And the younger the person in question is, I always have to remind my new hires, like I have this saying, like people don't fire their friends. Like if your barber that's like your boy gives you a bad haircut, you go back and you're like, hey, can you fix this? If it's not your boy and you just like stop there one time in a hurry, you're just not going back. You're going to go back to your barber and ask him to fix it. So like because you had the steamroll scenario, because they had no relationship, that customer, in a perfect world, they might come back and return it and say, you know, I didn't want this stuff. You weren't listening to me. But we both know that almost never happens. The consumer will just go elsewhere, and they might leave you a bad review, but they often don't give you a chance to fix it. So it's like, you know, I tell my employees all the time, it's like the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, the better you get at this, the more you have to wield that power for good, not evil. You know, and part of that is like, you have to, Justin, I think about it too, like, it's like the fine art of like, okay, you're here for a fat burner. I'm going to let you buy the fat burner in most cases because that's what you want. But how can I maybe convince you that is just sort of like the rocket fuel, the grease on the wheel to like this underlying thing we're going to talk about. And if you reject me, I had a woman the other day, it was a wonderful interaction. She came in, she knew exactly what she wanted as a fat burner. It doesn't even matter which one's immaterial, and she was like, look, I eat once a day right now. I've lost 3 pounds this week alone. I'm doing great. My girlfriend recommended this to me. So number one, I don't touch recos because I think it's somewhat arrogant and it makes the person who sent them in with the reco hate you. So I feel like if there's someone in the community that's sending people here to buy something from me, I'm not going to be like, actually, you should put that back. You know. And number two, I told the lady, I'm like, look, you can ride this for as long as it's continuing to work for you. If you're losing 3 pounds a week and you're not hungry and you're eating once a day, I would say that's great. But it's not if that's going to slow down, it's when you're going to hit a roadblock. And at that point, I just want you to come talk to me, and I'm going to discuss some things with you that maybe you might find helpful. She wasn't ready to, like, we weren't there. She was super excited because her girlfriend was having good luck with this product. And then she was sent in to buy the same product, and she already had sort of the momentum. And she's like, look, I'm not hungry. I'm eating once a day. I'm not hungry. And like, we both know, like, I remember the one time in my life, I paid for a professional, like, bodybuilding diet. With Shelby Starnes, he's fairly popular. Nothing bad to say about Shelby. Shelby's awesome. But I mean, again, probably 12 years ago at this point. But I remember Shelby gave me like a low day, right? He was a big carb cycling guy at the time. And I was like reporting back. I was like, Shelby, I'm stuffed. Like, this is way too much food. And he's like, yeah, see where you're at in 2 weeks. I remember thinking, like, he's out of his mind. And then, like, sure as shit, 2 weeks later, on the low day, I was starving. But like, we've all been there, and you have to learn that for yourself. Because I was still fairly, like, I wasn't an idiot at the time, and I was still telling him, like, this is way too much food. And he's like, nah, you'll be fine. You know, so yeah, it's sort of like when you're a teenager, your dad tells you, like, don't do that. And you're like, gonna go do it. And then like years later, you're like, that was right, you know?
Right. Yeah, you're kind of like, oh, I'll just wait until you're ready to hear my answer.
I think in a lot of retailers, that whole, like, they have to have the perfect basket the first time they come in is like highly overrated. I did, I think, 3.5 years at GNC. And I eventually was asked to leave. I was fired because I didn't follow KPIs. And by the way, Brian Horsberg was my senior sales manager at the time, and I know he watches this channel, so I think I'm doing better now. But hey, Ryan, thank you. But I always knew that the returning customers, like, I could let them come in and they could buy like the worst product in the store, or honestly, it could have been the best product in the store that I didn't make a KPI or a commission off of. But I knew each return, they were going to trust me more, and I could eventually talk them into doing the type of packages that I wanted to be working with them on. And I always had the happiest returning customers, but eventually I was the one fired because I wasn't selling multi-packs, you know? So it is what it is.
You know, I've often said I don't regret my time with GNC. I think we were successful, my little market, despite that culture, not because of it. And as the time wore on, Ben, it became increasingly harder to like have the rebel group within. You know, it's like our bosses change, and they're like, "What are you guys doing exactly?" And it's funny. Our little senior management team is now, in some ways, like all over the industry. Brandon has a pretty good CV, right? He's been with Compound Solutions. He's his own brand. And this other, it's actually, he at the time was the youngest RSD in GNC history. Shout out to Carter. Carter is now employed on Europa's team, but he's been with Muscle Foods. He worked for GNC corporate. You know, like, we were kind of told, like, your rebel unit sucks and you're gonna have to comply. And we were like, hey, thanks. We all have other job offers. But like, at the time, it was cool to have like the insurrection because we were getting customers' results. Like, I remember they sent the regional loss prevention manager to my store because our store was up $400,000 versus 2 years prior. But I mean, again, confluence of luck, right place, right time, right job, right time. But I was on the University of Illinois campus. There has since been $1 million vitamin shop opened up in Champaign-Urbana that wasn't there at the time. our only competitor was like a shitty Complete Nutrition. And I was like just murdering it by being like a good friendly dude that was like roughly college age, you know, like that was it. And we had our little pockets of like rebelling against the KPIs while still trying to cough up respectable KPIs so we didn't get our heads blown off. But I'll give you an example just to add on to your point, and then we can leave it alone.
Sure.
GNC had an initiative called OMS, stands for One More Sale. What you're supposed to do is ask the customer at the register if they'd like to add on to their purchase. You guys have probably all seen those B Balance chews. They're delicious. They contribute no real calcium, maybe some vitamin D. But they're awesome. They're dulce de leche. I still remember. Then we had like an acai berry chew, a fish oil chew. Ben, our timelines there may have coincided at some point.
I think so.
You may remember some of these things. So we all have been to the supermarket when they're like, all right, sir, 46, 45. And also, do you want these M&Ms? And you're like, what? No, I just want to pay you. It's like, you're never going to do that very seldom. Now, obviously, it's like McDonald's. Do you want fries with that? They wouldn't say it if it didn't work. But I always found that interaction painfully awkward and also like sort of like an afterthought. Like when they're trying to hand me their credit card, it's stupid. So I would take my little sample bowl. I would go stand in the mouth of my store, which was in a mall. And I would say hi to everyone and ask that anyone who would make eye contact with me. I remember I had just read 4 Hour Workweek. I was all hopped up on Tim Ferriss. And Tim Ferriss had this social awkwardness experiment, something like that, where you would have to lay on the floor in the middle of a Starbucks. And also he later changed it to asking Starbucks for a discount without giving them a reason, which I find to be the more productive of the two. So the idea is you go to a big coffee shop that's probably not going to give you a discount, not your local mom and pop, and you check out and you have the stones to be like, hey, can I have 10% off? And then if they're like, what? Why? You just don't say anything. Because I want 10% off. You can't be like, oh, it's a social experiment I'm running. I read this book and I was like, I'm not going to lay on the floor. My Starbucks is filthy. I'm going to stand in the mouth of my store in the mall and try to talk to every single person and give them calcium chews. And by rote of that, invariably, 1% would buy it, but I talked to 300 people a day. So there's my 3 OMS. That was, I think, the concept done well. Where it lost a lot of us was, to your point, Ben, we had a fish oil chew. Okay. So I can't put a lot of fish oil in a chew. It's going to taste like shit. You guys know that intuitively. That's why you're saying, oh God, I'm sure.
I was there. Okay.
Customers would say, well, you know what? Actually, I think I do want to take fish oil. My doc mentioned that to me. Or should I take fish oil? And, in the case of that question, the answer is probably yes. So they would say, should I take this one? And then the right thing to do to me was to bring them over to our triple strength fish oil, which was actually a passable fish oil. But the short-sighted but KPI stacking behavior would be to be like, yeah, this is the best. Take these fish oil chews with 120 milligrams of omega-3s. The problem with that is that's long-term good for the customer, our reaction, but it's if the employee stacks the KPI, it's short-term good for them. So the incentive is away from retention. And that's why GNC struggles with retention, because everything they do is short-sighted. And by the time they had a CEO in there that could maybe figure this out, it was already in like the death rattle.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's one thing that you talked about, and it kind of ties into my experience with the supplement industry. I haven't been in the industry for very long because, but we talk about how, Jacob is sort of getting started and, going to have employees, and then you hire employees. So what I noticed was, I had shopped at GNC and stuff like that for the longest time up until a couple of years ago. And when I eventually was like, took the initiative and started learning about this stuff, what I realized, I was like, the next sort of few times I went into like a GNC or vitamin shop, I was like, holy shit. To your quote, what you said earlier about great power comes great responsibility. I was like, this is a lot. These kids that were working there, I was like, they hold a lot of power to people's lives. Like for long term, like these people are coming in here with potentially serious issues that they don't want to go to their doctors for. And that's a lot to put on an employee, especially if you're not cultivating those employees. And I remember having like that aha moment with me. I was like, I just can't, kind of support this anymore. I was like, that is so much responsibility to put on that person that's probably there part-time as a college student, just trying to pick up a few hours, make a few bucks to go out to the bars, later on. And I was like, this is a fucked system. I was like, because these people, these customers, this is not how this is supposed to kind of come together. Fast forward, the first time I went to Natural Body Inc. was when I was like, wow, okay, this is totally different. And I, so ever since then, when I meet people like Jacob and you sort of hear that same language and that same approach, you're kind of like, okay, like this is how it should be, I think. So anyway, that's just my story.
Right. No, I remember like building the business plan for TNS, like before I actually opened the store, before I signed the lease and all that. And all of the mentors in my, in my life for, nutrition were like, hey, have you looked into Natural Body? And I know that sounds crazy, but you guys were referred so much that I actually started like following along and kind of seeing what Steve was doing. And, a lot of TNS, the kind of the, not so much the customer service aspect of it, but more of the small town kind of one-on-one behavior that goes on between customers and the employees. That was something that I wanted to develop because I had this hatred for, not hatred for GNC, but the way that things were run there, like Justin was saying. So that language was kind of developed.
Yeah, and, sometimes, guys, it's always like super flattering. I appreciate that. I think our reputation not only precedes us, but sometimes exceeds us, because like I don't even think it matters who it is. Brady from Nutrex used to tell me when he would travel, he'd be like, Tim, there's stores in Texas that watch the flyby. Like, and it's always been surreal to me, because I almost think in some ways, I always have to remind Steve and myself, sometimes our message appeals more to other shop owners than it does consumers, because like I'm like the jilted ex-lover. I had been burned so badly because GNC's like, look, I'll give you the Chrysler Town and Country at the ripe old age of 24, and we're going to let you run 29 stores, but you better turn KPIs. And that was the culture, and in some ways it was like, dude, I used to justify to myself like, okay, I'm going to sell this woman an active pack because it's got a little bit of CLA, a little bit of calcium, a little bit of vitamin D, and it's a multi, and this is inestimably better than what she's currently taking, right? But that's a slippery slope, because what I said there is on its face true, but like that also discounts the fact that there's other things beyond that she could go a step further with. And again, I was in Champaign, Urbana, where the University of Illinois campus is, but that touches a bunch of small towns. So it's really easy to say that to yourself at 24 when the active pack is probably a net good for everyone you give it to. But at some point, like, my appetite got deeper than that. And like, I started to question like stuff like that little OMS example. It was like, no, why would you upsell them to a fish oil? Because it's better. No, you had the OMS in hand, get the OMS. Those are so valuable. We're doing an OMS drive. Didn't you know? And it's like, well, they didn't know. They're experts, So yeah, like a lot of ways, Justin, like one of my core tenets, I had 2 comments on your thing. I draw a sharp, bright line between what we do and what a CVS does. Because I literally tell my hires, I don't need to talk to you to buy shampoo, and I can do a self-checkout. You're not a self-checkout. But like you said, I also don't go in and say like, I really don't want to go on high blood pressure medication. What shampoo do I need? Like we're capable of making those decisions for ourselves, toothpaste, deodorant, whatever, without a consultant and without anyone to help us. And that's why they have self-checkouts. But people that like emotionally need to they're tied to this thing where they need to lose 20 pounds to look good for their daughter's wedding or something, like that's not going to cut it. And Amazon can't solve that problem either. Not yet. And I hope they don't get there, because that's, it doesn't even take magic supplements. It takes someone who gives a shit. That's like probably Jacob's whole model too.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I think the second thing I was going to say was, and so in some ways our business model was like the GNC inverted. That's how I came to these things, is because I had like gone through the woods and come out the other side, like battle weary, but like, I'm never doing that again. There has to be a better way.
Yeah. And a lot of times like it's not a pitch, but our initial statement to customers that come in, and we're very like high energy at the store. Like if you've watched any of our videos, like you see how I am, I'm just loud, I'm outgoing.
I was crying when you had like, is it Isaac?
Yeah.
The customer's like, hey man, why should I listen to you? Like, you're not very big.
Oh, that was Austin. Yeah. He was like, you don't even
know
lift.
It's like a parody, but that was perfect.
Yeah. Well, and like, we're so high energy there. I know that I try to be, and I try to relay that to the guys, and people come in and they're intimidated by it, because that usually is the first sound of a cheesy salesman is like, oh yeah, let me blah, blah, blah. So a lot of times our initial statement is, look, man, we're not here to sell you everything. Like I want to help you. And so, once we meet that common ground, and like you said, it's about giving a shit, but
I knew you were more reasonable when I realized you sold Synthesix.
Well, that's so I've gotten a lot of shit for that one because of their issue, and I think it was 2012, right before Glambia bought them.
Oh, I just know that the regular Synthesix is 54% protein by scoop weight.
Well, yeah, but I have my logic for that one too, though.
It's going to get most people, if people are eating Synthesix instead of Cold Stone ice cream,
right?
Clearly a better choice.
Well, but you also have to understand that a large portion of our clientele is young males between the ages of 18 and 25 or so that have an issue gaining weight. And so instead of me selling them the weight gainer shake that has 15 servings for $60, we often kind of help them formulate their own mass gain shake by taking a scoop of Synthesix, adding milk, adding oats. So it's kind of a process for us. And, once they clean themselves up after their, amino spiking issue, which that was the main issue, that was the main crap I got for it. Because most of our people, if you're a person who has, sensitivities to, lactose or other issues like that, you want a leaner protein, or you're a bodybuilder, we got that too. But that was the initial.
Look, it's taste. It's a taste. I'm not defending it. But people walk in for it, you know, and maybe look, have you taken this before? Oh my God, I love it.
Right.
I'm leaving it alone. But if they're like, hey, why? Is there something you recommend? Then I'm not necessarily defaulting to it, but I get it. You're in a tough spot when that's what makes the door open, and they were sent in for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I see Synthesix. Yes, it is an amazing taste, but also it's a good conversation starter because a lot of young, I say dudes, but also people who want to, make muscle gains, right? They come in and they're like, yeah, I'm trying to get big, but I'm also trying to keep my, lose fat, and I don't want a lot of sugar. And so when we talk about Synthesix, it brings up a lot of conversation. It does have carbs, it does have fats in it, but here's why it can possibly benefit you. So we're not.
Everybody's done that before though too. So sometimes we talk about we're further say down the path, but Ben and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, we all took C4, even the shittier one probably. I was like, we all walked into a place and said, I don't know, I just want to be jacked and be ripped at the same time. Give me the product for we all did it, but you had to have someone, or you had to learn the hard way that wasn't what worked. So it's what's that?
Yeah.
It seemed simpler at the time when I was asking them how to get jacked.
Yeah. Oh, I know, right? But it always sparks a really cool conversation because especially the people that want to get jacked and lose fat at the same time, it helps me explain calories and intake to people with it.
Right.
Yeah. Thermodynamics,
the GNC model, we don't want to spark conversation, man.
Oh, no. We want to, I would rather our first time customer leave with nothing in their hands, but a found trust in us than them leave with $200 worth of stuff. If that's the case, I feel personally, I don't know about you, Tim, if I chalk on $200 worth of products to a first time customer, I don't feel like I've had the time to explain every product and why it can help them and how to take it. Yeah. But maybe that's just me.
No, my ultimate litmus test with new hires is if they're not excited about everything in the bag, then they're going to return it. And you've also led them astray. So again, this is the gun thing. You start fighting with your fists, and then you work up to various more weapons of destruction. You could conceive $200 worth of stuff that could theoretically help them.
Oh, of course.
My training is hey, Mr. New Hire, Mrs. New Hire, pretend you got a $500 gift card to Natural Body. At any point in that conversation, are you asking me hey, what's the cheapest amino? Or how long is this going to last me? Right? You have essentially the blank check. You can build your dream stack. But if you can't communicate those things to the customer in a way that makes them excited about what each one's going to do, then you ultimately the contract you have has let them down.
Yeah. I definitely had a lot of customers leaving the store with a receipt paper printed out with macros and MyFitnessPal.
That's the important part.
It's important. Yeah. we're running on an hour, and we've had multiple people request this, so I have to ask it now at the hour mark. Get up to speed. Where did the flyby start?
I was lamenting the fact that none of the current at that time employees had ever seen like the Top Gun scene, where it's like Ghost Rider requesting flyby and like negative Ghost Rider. The pattern is like, I don't know what it is, but like maybe I'm just like some weird Midwestern movie quoter. You guys can shoot me straight, but like I like, like my lived experience is like 10 movies a day. I'll think to myself in my head like that, that reminds me of that. And then like I'll quote these things and they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like the movie. And they're like, I never saw it. And I'm like, what? Like I literally told my employees, like, go home and watch Braveheart and don't leave the house till you like, like whenever I hear one of these like movies that informed my childhood that they're like, no, I never saw it. I'm like, I don't know how to relate to you. So on that particular day, we had stumbled on Top Gun, and I was like, look, like he's told he can't fly by the tower, and he does anyway. He buzzes the tower, and the guy spills the coffee on himself. So I was like, hey, and then this sounds almost contrived, but I was like, they're like, what's a fly? Like, so what does that mean? He flew by. I'm like, he flies past the tower. And so I was like, look, I'm going to do this. I bet you the customers will know what this is. So if you actually go back to the very first instance of this, it's me, and it wasn't even a poll function. It's me asking customers, if I was going to say this quote, what is this from? And like, invariably I got some DMs saying Top Gun, and people are like, what? But it started the wheels turning. And actually there's another one we can do a straw poll with our live stream attendees here. Do you guys know what a Shamrock Shake is? No?
Definitely do.
Yeah, like really? This is like a divisive question. I thought this was a standard.
Really?
I thought this was standard.
That hurts a little bit.
Well, I think it's a New York thing, because then I felt like what's that movie, like a strange famous science fiction book, Strange Something in a Strange Land. But like no one knew what a Shamrock Shake was, and I started to think I was like being gaslit, or like had my childhood was a lie. But like every McDonald's me growing up had Shamrock. So I think it was like Centurion Labs had like a flavor, and I was trying to. But I guess my point is I had done this before. I had made like a pop culture reference, and like the team was like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." So I took it to. So it literally grew up as a joke, and then I started to see the potential quickly, and it was so informal. It went through several stages. It was like I would go over their shoulder. That was why it originally reminded me of Top Gun. Like the guys would be packing, and I was like, "Hey, I'm just gonna do a quick flyby here. You don't have to do anything. Pretend I'm not here." And I would like literally, and then like they were. At some point, like they'll tease me that I became like super OCD and weird about it, but like now I have to go into like my secluded cave where no one can bother me. And like it's funny when reps show up and they're like, "Hey, we just have to. Can you open the back real quick? Like we have to make a delivery." And like what? And people are like, "You can't talk to. He's doing the flyby." And they're like, "LOL. Like, can you go get him?" And they're like, "No, like he's out of play here for like 40 minutes." And they're like, "What?" And like, so like
it's your hobbit hole is what I was told. Because the one time I came up when you were doing it. It was so funny because I was like, well, I'll go back there and say hi. And people were like, I don't know if
that's my Kingsguard. I trained them well. Because like, I took a lot of pride eventually into the product I was putting on the field. And I realized like, if someone walked behind me, it's definitely a Tim quirk, but I would like completely lose my train of thought. And then I'm like asking for their attention and not delivering the payoff. But I wish I could tell you this was some grand plan. It started 100% as in like a very innocent, almost playful thing. And then like I said, it went through a couple phases of growing pains where like they would be packing or the product would be one top of mind thought about it, and ultimately, but it's been like almost 4 years, I want to say. So the coolest part has been people coming up through all of that. And still they hung on for the ride.
So what you just said about losing a train of thought, I just have to segue into something because it like made me uncomfortable when you just said it. How about when you're recording Instagram stories and you go just a little bit too long and it doesn't keep it?
You lose a 4-pack for no reason.
You lose your entire train. Okay, I just had to get it out of my chest because I hear you like sometimes you're like, and I'm like, yes. I was like, I feel that so bad right now.
Yeah. My number one strategy for that is like to try to repeat the last word that got out of my mouth 4 times. Like I'm like, but it doesn't ever work out. Like I'm like, I kind of go off into a different direction after that.
You try to cram them in right before the timer runs out, and then you end up losing the whole thing.
No,
like,
you can like lay down a magical incantation. That's so. But then Murphy's Law of Instagram is like, not that one. Try again, and you're like, no, there's no way. I can't produce that again.
And
all
the way
the gems on the Instagram cutting room floor, man.
Yeah.
Like the way that we shoot ours, like this is totally like a side note. It like every 15 seconds there is like definitely a 3-second lapse between clips.
Yeah.
And so like when we shoot our updates, we record all of that in one shot, and then I cut it up into 60-second intervals. So like we'll go 15 seconds and say something important, and then 2 seconds out of that's completely gone. It's like you just skip to the next. So half the time none of our context makes sense. So but yeah.
Heather did a takeover of the Q&A on our Price Plow Instagram maybe 2 weeks ago. I always did the Q&As, but Heather took over for a day while I was busy. And she texted me like 15 minutes in. She was like, you have to do this in 15-second intervals. Like,
people are always mind blown. They're like, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that?
You do this in like 100 times in a day. Like you talk. And I was like, eventually you just end up talking in 15 seconds automatically. Like it's just natural to you. And I guess probably all three of you understand that now, which is a topic I would love to talk about, is these people that ask all of us the same questions.
Yes.
Like mom says no and dad's going to tell you yes. And yet I love this because it's actually funny. Like I got to a point where I don't watch anyone else's social media. I don't have time for it very much anymore. And Justin really started laughing at me because we all have the same answer almost every single time, which makes me really proud that we're that in tune. It's classic. I love it.
I guess the most frustrating part for me is just I don't understand the motive. If we agree, then do they proceed, with renewed vigor and double down on their goals? But if we disagree, like it's not even like it's not motivated by any sort of I want to be right or first. It's more like I don't know what they do with Justin. We've talked about this at just ridiculous length, but as long as it doesn't make them, it doesn't tie them up and make them hesitant, then I don't even mind. I actually think it's very interesting when we don't quite agree.
Yes.
But I worry that that's going to lead to inaction because it's like any sort of doubt and they pause,
Yeah, I think what you just said was perfect. It's like, it's good when there's like little differences because I'm like, isn't that a good thing that there, necessarily isn't just some, it's like the whole best thing. Isn't it good that there's not some, just one? Yeah. Someone had asked me a question. They give me a list of different fat burners to try. And I was like, you could buy any one of those.
Yeah.
Any one of those and you're fine. You're going to be totally fine. Like you've already won. Like you've already gone blowing past what we went through, sort of just stumbling around. I was like, you're locked in, you're in the zone. I was like, now go have fun with this, kind of thing is what I try to tell people.
So go ahead.
I was just saying, I see a lot of people, there are other people in this space that do Q&As, and when people ask them, what fat burner should I use? They have a answer. It's what pre-workout should I use? An answer. And I love the way that the four of us take a step back. I think Tim does it the best just because he has the most incredible vocabulary, but and like talks about like the environment and the setting and how you're entering this discussion. And it really makes me proud that we don't all just have straight answers.
So 3 years ago, my hobby horse that I rode into the ground, and it's not as big of a problem as it was then. But back then, Justin, you probably remember this, is what I used to rail about the most was the quote unquote sponsored athlete problem, or put another way, the don't ask a barber if you need a haircut problem. And it's exactly what you're talking about, Ben. It's if you ask company representative X, what's the best fat burner, they're going to respond with company X's fat. Like it would be ludicrous to think otherwise, but also people don't realize how much of the world that foreclosed them off. And then when I really started to realize this was like several points of enlightenment for me was like, number one, all the sponsored athletes after the block party all congregate and buy everyone else's shit. Number two, I've worked out with many of them, many high profile bodybuilders. They're all asking you what's in your bag and can they try some? They're not being like, I only take my sponsors' products. And then number three, I would go to like these people's houses that were like ostensibly loyal to a brand, and they would be like they would like shoot the promo thing and then like like then they'd open their cabinet and it was like, you know, it just the delta between on-camera activity and off, like it's like virtue signaling. It's like they present this thing, but behind closed doors they actually do this behavior. And again, I think people have gotten there, but one of my favorite things the Flyby ever produced, you know, impromptu, was that's not how real people take supplements. None of you guys in your cabinet have one brand, which is not to say that like there's so many good brands now that if you're like, Tim, for a week, you only take their products, I'd be like, okay, cool, that's fine. Like, but I also don't want that forever and think that's somewhat disingenuous to pretend like that's the best possible assemblage of different stuff.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite parts of this whole thing is how Justin's whole "there is no best" has leaked into so many parts of my life. I find myself saying that, like, even Heather, like, what's the best way for you to do this on social media? There is no best.
You just say it to everything.
like every part of my life, there is no
the
best.
Jedi thing. Like,
Right.
these aren't the droids you're looking for.
Yeah.
It's like
There's another movie reference. I love it. I don't find a lot of other people that think that way in the industry. Like even like formulators that may work for one company but formulate for a few different ones. They think so much in like just their own trench, their own thought process all the time.
Oh, sorry, Ben.
No, that was my thought process.
Oh no, I was gonna say that that kind of surprises me, you know, given that these individuals have so much knowledge of ingredients and, you know, how they function together and their synergy. I understand why the consumer, why our customers have like a bias for certain brands or for certain, you know, specific SKUs. But that's really interesting that like some of the top, you know, formulators or people within a company have such a hard line. Like, do you think it's actually that they believe theirs is the best, or they know that they work for that, you know, company?
So I sat down to do a pump product with a company a couple weeks ago, and they're like, bring an idea of what you want to do. And I showed up with like 4 different formulas. Like, well, depending on what direction we go with this, there's like your main ingredients and like the supporting ingredients behind that. Mm-hmm. Like, well, which one's the best? I'm like, well, listen, they're just all different. Like, they just all have different pathways. Like for instance, you could go nitrosogene as one of your main ingredients with citrulline, or you could go nitrates. You can't do them together.
Yeah.
Those don't play together well with licenses.
Yeah.
And like, there's nothing wrong with either one. I like both, but you're gonna have to choose which one you want.
Right.
Jacob, one thing I found interesting, and you probably, I mean, certainly, Ben, you've seen this, but oftentimes, and I'm gonna double down on the movie references. So we'll see if we can have fun with it. Formula will follow the formulator across brands.
Oh yeah.
And so what I think
doubt.
Right away is, you know, in Knocked Up when he's like, "Hey, he's doing the dice move too much."
He's doing it too much.
It's like,
it's the only move he's got, man. It's the only move he's got.
It's like they once stumbled into like a pleasing pump combination, and then all of a sudden 6 brands, you know. Yep. But like I think you asked that question, like, why is that happening? I think it's kind of like you are biased towards what you know and what you've had success with in the past, and it's hard to break that like tunnel vision.
Yeah, so they kind of get attached to their one hit wonder, so to speak. So they want to stick to their guns. Yeah.
There's also, like, we'll be real about it, there are allegiances to certain companies. For whatever reason, it could be like the quality data they produce or the people involved in the process. I mean, like, I know some incredible ingredients that the people involved with the ingredients are just bad people. And that makes it hard for me to support them. There's all sorts of different reasons. At the end of the day, I find that some formulators are so obsessed with being anti-status quo that it hurts them. You know, they want to be so different. Like, citrulline works for me. Like, I don't have a problem with citrulline. There's a lot of people that just don't like citrulline. I'm like, some of them are like,
I'm a big fan.
Ben, do you remember that? It doesn't really matter who it was, but someone was saying like, predictable means like outdated, and I was like, dude, predictable means like
it's good.
Yeah,
it's gonna be consistent. That's
it's like comfort food, you know, like you watch, you eat a good meal or watch a movie that you're fond of because you know what to expect. You don't always want novelty. Sometimes.
I got made fun of for liking Nutrao Pre. I think this happens to me a lot.
For what?
Nutrao Pre, you know, that 28-gram pre-workout that has like
all the theanine in it.
The one that beats the shit out of the field, yeah.
It's predictable, and like they're like, it's not that great of a pre-workout. I'm like, I'm not saying it's like revolutionary. It's actually not, but it's predictable. It works every single time. Mike and I have a joke that if we think about what pre-workout we're going to use for more than 30 seconds, we just go NutriBrate. You know, if I don't really know what I'm going to be doing that day, NutriBrate. It's pretty easy. I called one of Dragon Pharma's products Simple. I think it was their veins, and the CEO did not like that I said that. It's not simple. I'm like, it's predictable. Like, I look at these on paper, I know what it's gonna feel like. I don't even have to take it to tell you what it's gonna feel like.
Yeah, like I don't know if the company's like premise on, and not that company, any company, you don't want the premise to be like, oh, roll the dice, see if it works. You know, like it's a toss up.
Well, this goes back. Well, you've been around Bakuzi for a long time.
How did I know you were going to say this?
Because you have to. If you're going to bring up mystery, we got to talk about James Bakuzi and the mystery of proprietary blends, because you don't know what you're getting, and that's a totally sound reasoning, actually. I think.
Well, I think we talked about this before, where I said, you know, everybody makes the point, which is true. Like most everybody's like favorite pre-workout of all time is probably some proprietary blended. But once you get out of that, right? If I'm going to take a fish oil, or I'm going to take a cardiovascular health supplement, I want to know what the dosages are, because I want to know if I'm getting enough to work. So it makes no sense. So I hate that argument about like, oh, well, everybody used Jack back in the day. And it's like, okay, can we not use that as the example of what we're doing here?
Let's be honest and realize that like our favorite pre-workouts are usually not for responsible reasons.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, pre-workout. Now, Justin, that logic may not actually extend into like an experiential category, but like I don't take my HDL product and I'm like, yo, hey, let's go for a ride. You know?
Like, yeah, for sure.
But I've literally thought that a few times. I have dry scooped Superhuman Supreme to the face. I've double scooped Hooligan. I've triple scooped God of Rage, and it's just like, let's see what happens. Let's see what. I usually come out really well on the other side.
Well,
but
you're still here.
Go ahead.
I have a big total. I be real about it. Sometimes we do irresponsible things and it works out well, I guess.
Well, as a brief aside, someone was asking me about like Beba, the Mitoburn, and it, like, you know, most of the companies are like, oh, about a gram or whatever, and I was like, people, or like the other day, someone's like, oh, well, Tim, I totaled up what you were saying, and it's like 2 grams of KSM that day, and I was like, yeah, I'm still kicking, you know, like I didn't know what they thought was good at, but I was like, yeah, I'm actually here to tell you that I survived the 2 grams brushed with death, but.
You know, if you think about it, like so no one takes things responsibly. No one really follows the scoop size and 1 serving at a time. Like very rarely. Okay, this industry, there's tons of people that just take shit. They have no idea what it is, and really like
that's an important distinction. Yes,
I don't want to like downplay it, but not much like happens. We still like point to like 2 like controversial deaths about DMA that didn't even really matter, but it's like, if this stuff was all so, you know, just so dangerous for us, a lot of stuff like would have. That's just kind of the way I look at it, because I'm like, man, people are.
Let's use Ben. Big total, you know, an adept lifter, probably even more than I can conceive, because he said poundages on his back that I've never had. But flyby fans will recognize this one. Hemingway said about writing, and maybe this is one of those like Churchillian drift where it wasn't actually Hemingway, but let's pretend. He said, first you have to know the rules, and only then can you break them, right? So like, I feel far more like good about Ben being like, yeah, I double scooped Hooligan than like the person walking into my store that's never, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. He kind of knows enough to like, he knows the stakes, and he's choosing to infract on them.
Yeah, and then the background on that is that I had been doing a lot of research on the safety data of caffeine. Justin was very involved in my life at this point. We talked a lot about caffeine in these couple of months. And I titrated myself up to that 1,400 milligram dosage of caffeine through that competition prep. Like, I didn't just jump in and just say.
Yeah, it wasn't haphazard. It was like premeditated.
No, I always make the analogy. When I was in high school, I took a lot of music theory classes, and one of the first things you learn are the 5 Ottman rules. It's like the rules of making music, and with those rules, you can make pretty much any good song. And then once you've learned those rules, then you learn how to break them. You know, you have to understand the rules to be able to go past them. And a lot of the times, like when I get into arguments with other reviewers out there, when we talk about this kind of stuff, it's just like, I've worked in a I worked in a CGMP facility. Like I understand all these, I understand the safety data, and that's why I bend the rules a little bit. I don't just jump into it and just throw things into my body that I don't know what they are.
Yeah, like, okay, you guys know, like, oh, we're doing another movie. The end of the Matrix, when he can see like the you know, the binary zeros and ones, and he can like edit the code.
Yeah.
We've all been there where like, you know, someone will post a pre-workout, and then like the guy who has just booted up the browser for the first time ever, probably Internet Explorer, is like, it doesn't have 3.2 grams of beta alanine, and then like that's like level 1, you know, and then like level 2 critique is like, it's a prop blend, and there's some validity to that, but it's when people parrot that, that's right. They're not coming at it from a thoughtful place of understanding. They're just regurgitating something they read, and then like, so my most controversial position that I hold, by far, the one I've gotten the most blowback on, is actually the whole thing about like, you guys ever heard me do like scientists versus alchemists?
Oh yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions. Like, what is the most shit you get about like your?
Well, that's not from like CEOs, like Ben said, like that's a different one, but this is from people I respect even, and what I think actually, I'm going to try this here. I tried to make this point the other day, and I don't know if the customer I was talking to really grabbed onto what I was saying, but you guys will, I think, in a second. It's like, you guys know how like there's that whole like, it's like concealed preferences where like people will say they're going to vote for someone, but then privately do a different thing. Okay. And so these three things came together in like my brain. And then I think I realized this, is that I was reading, Justin, I talked about this before. There's a book by a guy named Richard Betts. It's called The Scratch-and-Sniff Guide to Being a Wine Expert. And he wrote the book with the express purpose of taking wines, expensive or not, wines off the pedestal and making them available to the lay people. Because like people try to claim that requires expertise and make it like less fun for like you need a guide, you need an interpreter, you're not qualified to buy wine. Who are you to tell me what I'm into? So let's go to level 3 now, which is like, don't kink shame me, don't slut shame me, right? Like that's probably like, people will tell everyone they're like into mundane, everyday like kinks and stuff, but reality behind closed doors, concealed preferences. Most people probably have like turn-ons that they're not like ready to share with the world or whatever. If we tie all that into supplements, what I said is like, I wanted to make it okay for someone to be like, I like that pre-workout because I like the taste. And I understand it's a prop blend, or I understand it's underdosed on beta alanine, or I understand it's underdosed on citrulline, or I understand it has DMHA. Whatever that looks like for you, it's okay if you like that. And you don't have to explain to the world like, oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. I shouldn't take this because it's not clinically dosed on beta alanine. It's irresponsible. I don't know if those three things made sense, but like, I just kept thinking about this from different lenses. Yeah. Like I keep coming back to like, our whole industry, I see all these like armchair pundits who make a living taking shots on Facebook. I saw Ben, I think one time you got tangled up with some guy who was taking pot shots at Ghost formula. And he's like, oh, you know, the citrulline's underdosed or something. And like, it's just like, dude.
I am constantly in a tangle like that, just for the record. My notifications are a massive tangle of that. And in this case, I don't care anymore. I want everyone to know that in this case, my kink is S7. I'm proud of it. I don't even care that studies don't really look that great. It feels great. I like the way it makes me feel. I realize that the studies don't work.
You know, that's
I totally understand what you're saying. I totally understand it.
Yeah, Ben's more qualified to make that than 99% of the people. And then what's everyone's favorite punching bag right now? S7, you know, like I understand the study sucks. I totally get it. But if you're into it, you're allowed to be into it. And like, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That part drives me nuts as someone who's like 10 years in. I feel like when I got into this, I was like Johnny fucking fact sheet. And I was like, well, the clinical dose says like whatever. So frankly, I don't know why you'd consider anything but that. And like, as I made it out the other side, that was like the Neo moment of like, if this is what gets you in the mood to squat heavy, like do that. And it's okay.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that I've done is like, it was actually, it's funny. You bring up that conversation about that Ghost Legend conversation of exactly what you're talking about. Because of that, I took 1.5 scoop of Legend and squatted 650 for a double. And it was just like, fuck you. Like, you couldn't do this with like 7 scoops of Hooligan. Like you don't need all of these huge ingredients to be able to do this. Like I can do it on what I think it's a 12-gram pre-workout. It's the fact that these people need so much, they don't really need all that much at all. What's that saying that Jacob, you called me? Like you probably suck. You don't need this.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
You don't need all of this. Like the vast majority, I try to be really honest and real about it. Like the vast majority of my viewers don't need that much. They don't train that hard. They don't like their diet is not that great. They don't need a ton of stuff.
And I think a lot of people that find themselves circulating, around our outlets, not to say that supplements aren't great. I mean, obviously we've built our careers off of supplements, but a lot of people like step over dollars to pick up dimes, so to speak. And like, they're totally leaving out the fact that their sleep sucks. Their macronutrient intake sucks. Their training and progressive overload system sucks. So like, I see a lot of people that are it's paralysis by analysis. Yeah. And they're too,
Let's bring this all to like a relevant company to this conversation who is in the chat right now. Glaxon is someone that all four of us love. I know that they're big in Natural Body. Talking about like underdosed ingredients. Yeah, like when I posted Specimen for the first time, I got told that I'm biased because they paid me for the video. First of all, I did the video before they even paid me for anything. But
yeah, how dare you, Ben?
Yeah,
for all of us.
First of all, how dare I put food on my table? But like anyone who has ever hated on Specimen and then taken the trial, the serving size of it, they're like, holy shit. Like I've given the full scoop of it to people that are like, this isn't shit, dude. And then like 45 minutes later, they're sweating, they have a great pump, they had an amazing workout. And like, I would have never expected that.
Very first public review I ever gave on Specimen was it punches way above its weight class. Like I was like,
same.
I had to like look at the label again and be like, where is the trap? I don't know, I didn't know where that was coming from. And then I understand, sometimes I think synergy is like a weak argument. If anyone's going to pull it off, it's probably Joey, but sometimes bad companies try to cloak things under the guise of like, oh no, we're going for synergy. The sum total is greater than the parts. But like Specimen just wrecks everybody.
If you ever want to like everyone talks about like this, the Stack 3D comment bros, like the ones that are like 3.2 grams per like all that stuff. Yeah. If you ever want to see like the pinnacle of that, go to my forums for Price Pile. Like we have people on the just as Jake said, these guys will like they will cite more studies in this forum than Heather does on our articles, telling you why this product sucks. I sent it to Joey. I was like, yo, they're talking bad about, I think they were talking about hybrid at the time, and it morphed into Specimen. And he just came in and just like destroyed them. And it was amazing. Like there's no one that can do it like Joey does.
Tim, have you tried GFY?
Yes.
Yeah, I took it yesterday, I think.
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, what's y'all's in comparison as far as feel?
I think GFY, I've said it from the beginning, like people always say that GFY is like the stronger of the two. I don't think so. I think they're different for me. GFY is very above the neck energy. Like you're kind of like twinkling a little bit, like sort of just very cognitive, like holy shit kind of thing, where like Specimen for me feels more aggressive. Yeah, I feel the Jotunheim a little bit more. It's a little more like punchy.
I almost prefer GFY, but Specimen, it's definitely paradoxical because, like on paper, you're supposed to say GFY is stronger, but Specimen, I think, Specimen caters more to like the doom and gloom high stim crowd. As crazy as that is.
Specimen's more miserable, but I love it. GFY, I think GFY is like very literal. Like people coming out like, you guys don't make strong enough of a pre-workout. We need something stronger for brick and mortar. And Glaxon's like, hold my beer. Like, let's do this. And it's almost like, I don't know how into music you guys are. Joey's watching this. He's going to laugh at this reference. But if you ever listen to Tool, they have a song called Lateralis. And it's actually the Fibonacci sequence, moved. They use the Fibonacci sequence in it. And the guy who wrote it, Maynard, actually doesn't like the song. He says it's like a dick joke. It's like way too literal. It's like not, it's not creative because it's obvious. And that's how I feel about GFY. It's like the obvious pre-workout. And Specimen is way more creative. I love the Yohimbi in it, and I just have a way more of a wild experience. GFY is like it's predictable, like we were talking about before. Whereas Specimen, it's like, that is just in like a rogue Bronco that you're trying to ride, and it's just another kind of beast.
Well, it's like we talk about like, favorite pre-workouts or best pre-workouts, something like that. Like I and this is a cool thing. Like no matter how I wake up, like during the day, like I get up, do my thing, and then I go to the gym, whatever mood I'm in or however I slept or however the food intake was, whatever. There's a pre-workout that can get me to my end goal. Like that's the whole point, right? Like once you sort of find your lane, how it matches up with how it supplements the rest of your day, crazy enough as that is. Like when people ask like what supplements do you take, that's why I don't tell people what I take. Like I'll show and we'll talk about it, but I'm like, don't worry about what I take. Like there's a reason
not what you should
why
be
I
taking.
take. Right? It's like there's a reason
very
for it.
early. That is a non-productive discussion. As interesting as they might find it.
Yeah, it's like, I get it that people want to, it's like, okay, let's maybe get you in the ballpark a little bit and you can talk about certain things, but that doesn't help you do anything. And then you're actually like what we all know is you're robbing people of that experience to get there, which that's like the fun part. When you look back, you're like, there's like, now I'm almost like when I see people like that have never used like Core Fury, or maybe like haven't
love Fury.
It's like I tell that story all the time. Like when the first time I used pre-extreme, like after moving up from like ENGN, like if I could go back, like I would just love to be that person, me again, just go experience that again. But now I've been there, done that.
Hey, shout out to Engine with Picatropin. That was legit if you got it early enough.
Right? Yeah, I missed that. I got it when it was Picatropin free. And
little known facts that pre-extreme had it too.
And a lot of
Ben, Hall of Fame supplement move. You ready? Okay. Picatropin is niacin bonded to GABA, right? We all know that. That's fine.
Cool.
Okay. ProSups removed it because they were told to and replaced it with equal parts niacin and GABA. In other words, not bonded together.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about that a lot. We could talk about that with AAKG, citrulline malate. We could talk about that in a lot of different ways.
It's a drug in Russia, but at no point were they like, oh, you can just give the two constituents of it and it'll be fine. It'll be the same.
Is that like, when you take the corn into your potatoes, but then if you separate them, you don't mix them up and then everything's fine, totally different meal?
It's impossible to do. That's why KFC, it comes in a bowl. You can't untangle once it's...
Hey, so Fury, we want to talk a little bit about Core?
Oh,
they are killing it this year.
I gotta say, I had to back off the Fury love because the high stim guys weren't getting lit up, and then they were getting disappointed in my reco. But probably my favorite pre-workout so far this year. But that's like the fat middle part of my whatever preferences because I can't go all the way to 400 plus gloom and doom caffeine all the time. So it really lands well for me. If I'm doing just cardio though, I really have become fond of half scoop specimen because it it's very body fucks you up, but
did you try Nick's Immortal yet?
No, I love the look of that. I wanted to reward somebody and I hear great feedback.
It's good, man. That it's that and Fury for me are two that predictable. And I just get a good workout from them every single time.
Yeah, Fury, the Core line, especially with everything they've done this year, the rebrand and everything. I like to recommend that is your performance pre. You're not looking to be cracked out. You're not looking for that next stimulant level. You're looking for the best blood flow, the best possible performance, quote unquote. It's just dosed very well. And when you're training, in my opinion, you feel good. You're not specimened out. I made the mistake of sleeping on specimen a few weeks ago because I had never taken it prior. and I'm a guy that takes Devastate worldwide. That's kind of my thing. It's not crazy. It's a good, moderate, medium level. I took specimen, man, and I just started feeling weirdly happy driving to the gym on my motorcycle, and I was like, why are my armpits dripping sweat? And I'm happy for no reason. Well, you can ask Joey if you want to know the rest of that story, but apparently I was just
I would never ride a motorcycle after taking specimen.
Yeah, it was fun. I was clenching the grips a little bit harder than they should have been gripped. But
there's imprints of your hands on them now.
Oh yeah, no doubt, man. It's memory foam.
And kind of like your lateralis or I guess maybe before that the whole Hemingway thing. Another thing about Fury too, and Jacob, I'm piggybacking off your point. I know that you three are taking the performance nuts and bolts stuff. So you guys can uncork a specimen, and I'm pretty confident that if you wanted some extra blood flow or something, you would be taking citrulline and whatever.
Sure.
you can give a sort of middle of the road consumer Fury, and you're like smuggling in this is what you were saying, Jacob, this massive performance piece that, like, I understand that's not necessarily what moves units, and it's very much like a spin market, but like for people that aren't used to like the pre-extreme experience, Justin, like we Trojan horsed this awesome pump thing in Fury, and that's what that's why it's a good one for those people that like they don't know what a good pump product is, and they're maybe not trying to buy that separately. You know, that's also like an underrated part of it, I think. Like we all know that. The people watching this probably like, I have my pre-workouts and my performance pieces, and sometimes they mix and sometimes I just add them together. But for the lay consumer, I like stuff like that. Like I remember when Outlift Amped came out, like it was like enough stim that they were going to like me, but enough performance that they were like, oh, like this is what that feels like, you know?
Yeah, I've been having these conversations with people lately too, where, you're taking things for so long and then you don't realize how much you rely on them. We were talking about creatine. We were actually talking about amino acids and things like that. And then all of a sudden, Ben, I think I was telling you this because, I train fasted. I haven't eaten for a while. And what I've been doing is normally I have this routine where I take my intra and it's like a scoop of this and a scoop of this, and then I go. And it's usually one amino acid and then my carb product. Well, I started adding something else to the mix, so I 2 scoop, and then I go and I forget my amino acids. And I'm telling you, if I forget my amino acids, and this is without me even realizing it, my workouts are not as good. And I've had people mention this to me. They're like, I forgot to take my creatine or something for a little while. But we get so into your routine, you don't realize how much it actually is helping you until you remove it sort of from the process. And you're like, oh shit, like kind of, I've been using that, and that's a good thing. So it's like, it kind of goes with the whole like experimentation. Like it's just part of the fun part of the process is like, well, add it to it, see how you feel, remove it. Can you still, then that way, the next time someone says, Justin, amino acids are useless, I can say maybe for you, but not for me. So that's fine. Like I don't have to argue about it. You know what I mean?
I love how people lump amino acids together as if there's like one thing.
For sure.
It's like, oh yeah, everybody knows aminos are pointless. Like, wait, which ones? Like, because
and when, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's specific purposes for.
Well, we have found out that BCAAs are useless.
Right. We know.
They don't do anything. Yeah. They're useless.
100%.
They are not involved at all with protein.
Right.
So.
Imagine if we could just get people to understand that part of it, that's in protein. But that's because kind of like what I tell people, I was like, wouldn't it be comforting for you to find out this answer yourself, and then that way you'd never have to listen to me or Ben or something tell you that you're wrong, or somebody to tell you? Like, wouldn't that be nice and comforting? Like, wouldn't you sleep better at night going, well, I like arginine, so like, Ben, you like S7. It doesn't matter.
I wish there was a better way, like a more fun way to teach. Yeah. Listen, you guys taking it pure? It slaps, man. Well, Jacob, I know you take it pure.
Yeah, you know my experiment.
Jacob.
Yeah, we heard.
I like Brian, man.
Yeah.
It's like, did you guys ever go through the part of like your diet odyssey where you had convinced yourself that like carbs are bad?
100%.
Oh yeah, man.
Okay, so then you uncork like a 90-minute to 2-hour training session, and then like you've added carbs back into your intra, and you're like, oh my God, I'm like, this is absurd. This is should be illegal. This is how much of a difference it makes.
But I did the opposite.
Yeah.
I got to a point where I was drinking chocolate milk intra-workout. Like I went.
I think that's the sort of the thing that I went through. I inadvertently just changed up everything about my diet, and I really got away from carton. And I have a lot of trouble eating before I train. It's really hard for me to do, and I don't like it. So when I discovered the intra-carbohydrate products, for me, that was probably the biggest change in my workouts. Now, for someone else, it might not matter at all, but for me, and just my sort of journey through this whole thing, reintroducing them, and then like Tim, like what you talk about too, is how do you process this? Like I don't necessarily want to eat like a big meal, but if I have some of these designer carbohydrates that are really easier on the system, and it's just, I mean, for me, it's perfect.
Yeah, I'm showing that as an example of like the low hanging fruit that like the typical forum bro will always talk himself out of, because like, oh, carbs are killing you, diabetes, like inflammation, right? There's like this tenuous line between sugar and inflammation that no one can actually like connect. But like they'll leave that on the table and they're like, yeah, I did fasted cardio and then I lifted for 2 hours and, I'm going to extend my fast, but don't worry, I had my aminos or something. And it's like, dude, then you add a carb for them and it changes their whole like intensity and their output. And it's just one example, but it's like, it's so easy, but it gets overlooked.
I think one thing that you say that I have always appreciated, you're like, so if you break your fast, what happens?
Do they come to you to take you away? I don't know.
It's always, because people are like, well, does this break my fast? Does this break my fast? And you're like, well, if you break your fast, you'll be okay. I promise you'll still be here.
Says the person sipping on coffee with, sweetener and creamer in it, like as if secretions in your stomach are already going on. Like that's the biggest.
How ridiculous you want to be. There's a popular thing now in like these circles where there's like dry fasting, where like they don't drink water, like so water breaks. I'm not saying I espouse that, but like even like if you want to go pop culture, Jordan Peterson's daughter, Michaela Peterson, has been doing even longer fasting protocols and incorporating dry fasting, and it's like,
is that her like the lion diet or whatever?
See that rears its head into pop culture, and now you have people saying like, oh, I can't have water because that's what Justin's talking about. I used to say Yoda was the greatest Stoic philosopher of all time because he says, named must your fear be before banish it you can. So who's coming for you if you break the fast? And what are the consequences? There's nothing.
One thing we always talk about too is like whether it's fasting or keto or whatever this stuff is, at some point you have to modify it. Like, so then that's where it gets confusing because people ask me about fasting and I'm like, I just don't eat breakfast. That's all. Like, it's not a big deal. It's not like a fasting thing. But I was like, well, what fasting are you talking about? Because now there's 20 different fastings.
I think there's the health component of fasting, and there's also like the psychological component. Like Dr. Rhonda Patrick said it well. The JRE cast, whatever you think about that. She, definitely she's very well versed, and basically, I see fasting for most of my clientele as a psychological mechanism to condense your caloric intake. Right. Because it's a lot easier to eat less. But then on the other side, there's so many health benefits and hormonal benefits to completely restricting things from your body. I think that pop culture kind of merges those two, and then it creates this massive confusion.
Well, I got one protocol from John Meadows. As I start to get heavier, like once I get into like the upper 260s, I have a hard time with gaining weight, and there's only so much that I can really push my calories without turning into Will Whitlock, who is just an absolute machine with his calories. I think that some of it has to do.
That man.
Yeah, Tim, just to catch you up, Will Whitlock, owner of Leviathan Nutrition, like regularly puts his carbohydrates at over 900 grams, and like has no problem hitting it. But I think that a part of it has a lot to do with insulin sensitivity. Like I get to a certain weight, and I've put on like 20 pounds this season, and my body just doesn't want to respond as well. So I'll utilize like a 24-hour fast like every third week, and I think that it helps me out. A lot of stuff with John Meadows is a little bit ahead of like things that are actually studied. I'm not saying that he knows things that other people don't, but every here and there, I'm okay with a little bit of bro science. Often what happens is bodybuilders discover these things and then science legitimizes it later. They're like the tip of the spear. They have been early and right so many times that no one can discredit that. I'm just rejecting, I know you guys agree, but for people watching, there are a certain category of bro or broette out there that thinks that if the fast is broken, the fat loss is subsequently ruined, not only over, but ruined. Mm-hmm. And like, my thing is like, look, if to Jacob's point, because there's like two types of psychological dieters, but if you're the type where if I give you $100 in an envelope and say, this is all you get for the day, and you come back to me after 2 hours and say, I spent it all, I'm sorry. Those are the people that benefit from the fasting because it restricts the amount of time they can spend money. Yeah. But like, if that person's like, look, I just would love to put a little bit of heavy cream in my coffee in the morning. It gives me, an extra 4 or 5 hours of satiety. Like do that. Like, that sounds good. Right. Don't worry about whatever you sacrifice for the heavy cream because the payoff is so much better. Mm-hmm. I helped my best friend's mom with the diet a couple of years ago. And we couldn't figure out why she wasn't losing weight. I had her right out her breakfast, and she said, I have 2 cinnamon muffins with my breakfast. And I was like, well, what kind of muffins are these? And they were like these massive Wegmans muffins. Like, they were like the size of my hand. And each one of them was probably like 800 calories each. And I was like, well, this is the problem here. Like, your calories are all in these muffins because she really didn't eat much the rest of the day. I was like, how much are these muffins worth to you? She's like, they're very important to me. They help me get started with my day. Like, these muffins give me life. I was like, well, then everything else seems to decrease. That's absolutely fine. You love the muffins, but guess what? You don't get any carbs for the rest of the day.
Right.
You
but
know?
the whole diet needs to orient around the muffins.
Yeah. It's absolutely fine. I've done that with some weird things in my diet. Just like I have things that I don't want to give up, and that's okay. But you got to understand, everything else needs to fix.
Do you guys know who like Alberto Nunez is?
Oh God, yeah.
He was my coach.
Do you remember like the bodybuilding.com threads where it would be like, guess his drug stack? And it's like,
oh my God, yeah.
The guy weighs like 157 pounds, but like also like would have IPAs. Like when he was contest lean, I mean, that wasn't as like a.
But you know, even when he was in an off season, man, like the amount of calories Alberto could eat is ungodly. Like
right, but,
he's a machine.
I'm more or less holding this up as a testament to Ben's point that like at certain times Alberto was like, I guess you'd say infamous for like drinking milk on prep. And remember he would like go to the supermarket, check out and be like, eat tilapia, it thins your skin, like to make fun of like the advanced bodybuilders, you know, because like he would have all these ridiculous, like at one point he was so lazy he would microwave his chicken breast. Do you remember that? Like he would just like he'd take a raw chicken breast and put it in the microwave for 8 minutes and then just eat that. And like the bros showed up in droves to be like, this is not possible. He's on multiple IUs of GH at minimum, probably trend. And I was like, dude, he's 157 pounds and he counts the Pop Tarts. It's not witchcraft, you know. Like
it's quantification. I mean, how hard is that to understand?
Yeah, Ben, to your point, like at so many times throughout Alberto's career, I'd seen things like the muffins where he would like move his whole diet around the thing he wanted to eat and still get like jaw-droppingly lean.
Yeah, I think like when I see athletes doing that, I'm like, well, if you ate that for breakfast and you're training at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that's not exactly optimal for you. You know, I still do. When we really want to talk about things, like if you want to be the top of your game, like meal timing, like micronutrient density, a lot of that kind of stuff does need to be factored in. I'm not saying you can't lose weight eating ice cream all day long, but your body composition might not be that great. You know, I think there's definitely levels to this, but when we're just talking about like your best friend's mom trying to lose 10 pounds, like she can probably eat the muffins for breakfast.
And it's like, you know, you guys have all seen those people where like, if you take that away from them, all the wind goes out of their sails. Like that's the big thing that they, whatever that thing is, it's better to conserve that than to go to war with it.
100%.
Yeah. Like bringing everything full circle, the person going into the store that wants to buy some really shitty supplement.
Yeah, well, it's like it's like taking. Well, you can't have that pre-workout that gets you in the right mode that propels you to go to the gym and have the workout because it doesn't have enough beta-alanine in it. It's like, well, that's you're removing whatever it is that's motivating that person to go get the job done. It's like we're not going to do that.
I spoke to a CEO that was asking me if I think it's okay for their pre-workout to not have beta-alanine, and I was like, well. And this is like a well-known CEO, and it was a more philosophical question than a data question. It's like, are people going to revolt about this? Because I think they might. Like, they very well may, but that doesn't like negate the fact that it's not that important.
Yeah, and I mean it takes up room too. I know like making pre-workouts and stuff like that, and I'm like, well, let's do this formula, and like, well, we have to have beta-alanine, and it's like, well, you don't, but it's 3.2 grams of stuff you could use elsewhere that might be more beneficial in that pre-workout setting. But all right,
you know, we can't. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, Jacob, you probably get this, but I even have a subset of consumers that will say, what do you have that's beta-alanine free? I mean, that's not the majority, but they exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even like it came down to that question when we were formulating Enjoy the Ride, because I didn't want beta-alanine in there. Like I've read the data, like I understand there is benefit to it, you know, on a consistent basis, but I didn't want it in there. But I also realized that easily over 75% of our customers that buy pre-workout want the paresthesia, like they want that effect. And so I was like, okay, you know, like it's one of those things for most people, it's up here, I believe anyway. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I get it.
So, Tim, you usually can handle a little bit more of a complicated question. And there was one submitted by Michael, the owner of Klaxon, that I don't really know where I would take this question personally, but I feel like you might pick it up and take it somewhere. Can we talk about the product category obsolescence? Do you think it's a real thing? Like obsolete categories, I'm assuming.
So I helped I tell this story a while ago, Man Sports. They were in probably 2015, had tried to launch a product called New Pump, which I think was a bad name. That wasn't my name, but I think they had the right intentions with it. The problem was consumers would sometimes read it as No Pump. Aside from that, the intentions were noble. The formula was actually, I think, ahead of its time. They tried to smash together two categories that you often see now, and they work very well together, which is I'm going to Trojan horse or backdoor you some nootropics that are synergistic with stims under the auspices that you're probably going to take this pump product with stims. So it was take your pre-workout, add a layer of amplification that happens to be in the. Unfortunately, the product never did anything, and it was spiked after a year or two of lukewarm sales. But now you have things like Mr. Vane's, which I think is the most recent iteration is a really cool formula, and it has that Alpinia, tyrosine, I think Lion's Mane maybe, but so I'm trying to think of a category in my store that, like, for a while intras were in the basement. They weren't dead. You'll never kill them. But carbohydrate containing intras, but they're now experiencing a renaissance. And I don't know if that's John Meadows. I don't know if that's some innovation in the category. I don't know if that's the availability of cyclodextrin. I do know that if you get too far out on a limb, and it's not like what's that famous story where they went to pitch after like 3 failed movie pitches for Snakes on a Plane, someone came up with the idea that the pitch should be it's Jaws, but on an airplane and with snakes. And then once they said that to the movie producers, they're like, "Oh yeah, sold, done.
I get it."
Let's do it." Like, so it's like you have to turn those lights on in the consumer's brain somehow. If you can do that, they can. If there's something they can latch onto, I think they can. You can do entirely new categories. But if they don't know how to interact with it at all, I think if people don't know what box to put it in, it'll suffer. Is my consumer psychology take. I don't know if that's helpful, if I'm answering the right question, but I can't.
No, I feel that really well. I feel it a lot because, I like talking about this because it boosts me up a little bit. But Alpha EAA, I came up with the idea with it at Newsprint. I just walked in and talked to Dan and Mark about it. They actually really weren't interested in it. They were like, "I don't think people are going to buy that." I was like, the whole thing is like people take nootropics and people take EAAs, so let's take them together because that's going to work for like your students, your athletes, all this different kind of stuff. But I think there's a lot of times where people, I said this before, people want to be so counter culture, people want to be so against the grain that like they come up with these things. You're like, well, the normal consumer doesn't really have a place in their sack for that. So I kind of get that.
Yeah, like they have those slots and you have to be able to plug it into that so they can know. Like, I got to be honest, I saw the appeal, but at first I was like, Alpha EAA, I kept running into these people where they're like, oh, is it that or Intrablast? And I was like, that's a bad question. But Ben, test of time, as a credit to you, that has to be the NutriBio product I use the most consistently. Like I love that stuff.
Well, there's one like, I was going to say to this whole conversation, look at NutriBio's Reload recovery matrix. I think that's a product. It's a cool formula, but it like literally it has no place really. Like,
do you guys remember what it was called? Post. It was originally called Post. We actually we called it Post. It was supposed to be like post workout recovery, but you were supposed to take it the next morning, which didn't make any sense. So we renamed it Reload because everyone thought it was post workout, like you take it post workout. Like
so what I run into with that product is people will say, okay, this obviates the need for my shake, and I'm like, no. And they're like, and then it's like hard to get 2 items on the ticket. They're like, yeah, but it's again, people don't know where to put that. Like, there's also, if Mike's still watching, like think of how many times, like Nutrex completely, and there's other, I think Meadows had one like this too. Like that product Post Lift was an intra workout.
Yeah.
But because they called it that, everyone was like, nope. And I'm like, no, just do that. And they can't defy the label.
Isn't the Granite one called like Recover or something like that, but it's an intra?
Yeah.
Right, same idea. Like people are like, okay, so it's for post. You're like, no, during. John,
Post lift was the most confusing thing. I remember I was visiting something like, you got to see this post workout. I'm like, this is not a post workout. This is an intra workout. I don't care what they say. This is an intra workout. But I feel like all of that stuff comes from, I don't know if you guys remember Plasma from Biotest up in the UK. Yeah. That was like the OG intra workout.
And wasn't that attached to Meadows? Like
Meadows was some sort of an ambassador for that. Yeah.
But I think I credit John with introducing that important, like I remember John used to come up with these protocols for nutrition. It was like the majority of the client's carbs were consumed in the peri-workout window.
Yeah.
And everyone thought that was crazy like 7 years ago or whatever.
Well, it's funny, like Mark Lobliner says that he invented intra-workout, and that may be absolutely true with Scivation, but I really feel like John Meadows brought it to the consumers in a much more digestible way.
Well, we're kind of seeing that, like, I think all of us are sort of dealing with this too. It's just insanely popular line, but even like Alpha Lion sort of struggling with the marketing of it. But the Gains candy, where it started off like, okay, we're just going to give you a single ingredient to serve this purpose. Now they have a bunch of them, and people are struggling with like what to do with these products. And then you're like, well, what is this one versus this one? It's like, well, this is in this. And it's like, it was meant to sort of simplify things, but it seems to really be getting more confusing for people on like what to do with them.
I love the Gains candy line because when I brought out the content on Beba and Chloroburn and those like popular new ingredients, people were like, well, where can I find it? And part of the problem is that a lot of those really cool ingredients, like all of a sudden spark formulators to be like, I'm going to come out with this product that has berberine and Beba and grains of hair and all these different things that like don't always fit most consumers. And people come to me like, where can I find Beba? I'm like, well, you can't. So Gains candy was cool because you have the opportunity to take just that ingredient, but then all of a sudden it becomes this huge thing that you're like, all three of you get those questions. I love this because you guys all understand my frustration. What Gains candy should I take? I want to lose weight. Which one should I? It's not a solution. It's an ingredient. Like it's the opposite of the way that you're thinking about it.
I think it's a time problem. Like I tried to draw the analogy to like no one gets tied up by like buying bulk citrulline, bulk creatine, bulk beta alanine, but like they haven't crossed that bridge mentally that that's what that is. Yeah. On that side of the fence. But can any of you guys think of a category that was created sort of out of thin air recently? Because I'm struggling with that. I tried to invert his question and I can't.
I think I think obviously, well, it wasn't created, but the immune system category really picked up out of nowhere in the past, 6 months. And then, not to get back on Glaxon's back, but their Serenity, I think, really opened up a lot of doors.
I think Serenity would be a good one for it. I
like the Superhuman Burn. I think that a lot of people call it a 2-in-1. I'm like, man, this is like, there's a nootropic formula in it. There's a fat burning formula, and there's performance in it too. It's almost like, it's almost too.
They call it a pre-workout.
It's almost too good, really. Like it's just almost too much to put in one product. Where people are like, well, I don't really know what to do with it because it's not a hard-hitting stim like people are used to with Superhuman. And it does all these things like really well, but it's like I don't think people know really exactly what to do with that one either.
They call it a pre-workout, and I'm interested to see where it goes long term because my move would not have been to include the beta alanine and the citrulline and those things. My move would have been to double down on the Chloroburn and the Mitoburn. I don't own Alpha Line, so that's really cool if they did what they wanted to because I'm interested in seeing how that plays out because people love that product, but I want to see in 6 months if it's still something that people are using because I don't like one size fits all. I like modular, right? I like thermal from Glaxon. That Superhuman Burn and thermal came out at the same time, and I actually almost kind of prefer thermal because it's modular and fits into systems how you want it to. Superhuman Burn is an awesome one size fits all, but not everyone takes a fat burning pre-workout. Like I personally, I would rather take my Beba pre-cardio and then take a pre-workout for my endurance and strength and stuff like that. But I'm a very hyper-specific athlete, so I'm not always the best example here. So I'm interested to see if it lasts and creates a new category, but I'm not 100% sure yet. It's gonna be very interesting.
Well, what I love about thermal is it doesn't take a lot off the table for me. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it doesn't like, I'm not like, oh shit, I can't take my other carnitine because like that's more or less the carnitine I wanted anyhow. But Burn, like it's the anti-specialization pre-workout because that shows like, we both know that like maybe an advanced thing would be like to take, I don't know, let's give Core maybe due credit or Glaxon because they're here, like a plasm surge or plasm caps with like burn away, right? And then we're getting like the mashup. But that is occasionally a difficult bridge to build in the mind of a lay consumer. So for those people, I think something like Superhuman Burn could be a huge net win because it touches like 6 things that they would benefit from. Kind of like the core theory argument again. But like, I'm with Bennett, like that I get like, to me, it's like a bundle of compromises that's pretty good. Like I wouldn't be mad if maybe to take that. I just would be like, I'd want to shore up this a little bit. But again, we are like curse of knowledge, sort of like expert level shopping. And we forget that like most people aren't there, you know? And I don't mean that like, that's good and bad.
Yes.
What I was going to say too about the superhuman thing, where I think that I agree with what Tim's saying, where it is a perfect sort of product for so many people. But what I see is they've almost cannibalized themselves in a way. And by the way, I mean, I think we all know, like, I mean, we love what Alpha Line did. I mean, their year has been fucking monstrous. But they, you know, when you have superhuman is this hard hitting pre-workout, and then you bring in this, people expect something like that, so then they use that and then they're disappointed and then they move away from it. But really the only problem is they're just using it sort of in incorrect context, you know, perhaps because they're like, oh, I'm expecting that DMHA style, you know, kind of the superhuman. And that's one thing we've talked to Jordan is going to be a really good person to have on here, because he's got his marketing background, and a lot of what they struggle with is they're doing like all these cool things, but had like, he's like, even calling it Gains candy, it's now all these weight loss ingredients. He's like, even that trips people up. Like they're like, and people don't know that it's not gummies, like that it's because it looks like it's gummies. He's like, the marketing, he's like, we never really expected to have certain problems like what we're having, but you know, you get all these questions, and it's
they've had like an explosion of innovation last year, and like things that started here like ended up over here. It not everything was planned out, and that's totally cool and fine. They've just had an explosion of growth. And sometimes when you're doing that stuff, like you don't think about what the original plan was. Right. All those single ingredients work in with Gains candy, but obviously wasn't the original Gains candy like tea, cream, and dynamite. This is totally
and S7.
Yeah, and S7, totally different category here. Right. I think that superhuman burn it's a net win for most people, because it's an experience for a lot of people. Yeah, I think it's an experience for a lot of people that they'll love, but I'm interested in seeing if a lot of those consumers are return buyers for that, because a lot of people wanted to try Beba, and that's why they bought it. But now that it's available on its own, are they going to continue to want to buy it altogether? I think there's a life curve of most customers where you start off with that C4, they start to become more educated, and they end up taking that huge stack like a superhuman burn, and eventually turn into consumers like us, where you're buying 17 different products and stacking them how you will for whatever day. So we'll see. Well, I think it's not written yet.
Well, I was going to say, I know we're going on 2 hours. I wanted to make sure I got this question in for Tim. So if I take Chosen One with PCT5, is that an adequate pro-hormone stack?
Funny, because like I never thought that would be such a big thing, but then like I sort of had to switch my position, because I was like, look, I feel like I'm doing the world a service here, because this category gets such a bad rap, and also is like so fraught with like abuse or misunderstanding that people get like bad experiences, and you know, there's like bad advice out there. So well,
I want lean dry gains from Chosen One. So got to double it up.
Jacob was mentioned this earlier, like it's so common of a refrain from consumers, but people will be like, oh, I want to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. And I was like, nope, pick one. You know, like you can't ride 2 horses with one ass. And you can if you're on super supplements, but you know, those, even then it's not possible to the extent people believe it's possible. This whole like phenomenon of like bodybuilders growing into a show is so hard to pull off and so seldom done correctly. So
I actually want wet gains instead of dry gains. So whatever you tell Justin, I need a different stack for the wet gains.
Wet gains.
I want wet gains. I want to be sloppy.
That's unfortunately where the drug side of things merges into the supplement industry, and I think people misuse terms. You know, like
yeah. I the whole recomp idea. Or I mean, like hey, we need to eat candy corn post workout for that insulin spike.
Jesus, yeah, no.
Like, I'm just trying to trigger you guys. I'm sorry.
No, I mean
yeah.
No,
well, so my biggest pet peeve on that is people using the actual words in it, like when muscle meds did clenbuterol.
I was just gonna say that I didn't want to like put, you know, the evil eye on like anyone in particular, but like calling your product letrozole is not
hate it.
helpful, you know, because it conflates. Yeah, it's just even high tech annoys me with that. With like they have those like Anavar.
Anavar.
And it's like no, you know, but yeah.
That's the behavior of the back of the magazine where the small ads, like let those people do that stuff. Don't.
Justin, I had a question. I kid you not. The other day they said, and Ben, you'll laugh at this. They said, "How long should I take TRT?"
Wow.
Wow.
And I was like, "Well, you should ask your doctor because that's what TRT means." And
For the rest of your
But
life.
it's literally a replacement.
right.
It's not supplementation.
Yeah.
No, but they're not taking TRT. This is like garage, I'm sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thing like I think they thought they saw a clever workaround in the Q&A where I'm like, well, I won't answer questions about drug use, you know, unless it's whatever. Like, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on the flyby, but like people. So then I started saying like, well, if you're asking about testosterone, either you have a prescription or I can't answer the question. So then like, oh, I'm on TRT then, but how long should I take it? And it's like, you're not on TRT, you're just self-administering.
Mm-hmm.
That's
not
you know,
It's not the same thing.
like it's within your right, but like I get nervous that you think that's like something you're confused about, and that's sort of my analogy to the pro hormones is we have all these like bad terms that people misinterpret. Like no one would ever go to the doctor and say, "Don't prescribe me testosterone for my testosterone replacement therapy because I don't want to get any estrogen. I don't want to have wet gains or be bloated." But it ties me up to no end. People will literally be like, "Tim, I know you say the test base, but what do you think about taking 3 epi and 7-3 andro from Steel by themselves? Because that's what they say to do."
That's what the stack is on the site.
And
how bad does that piss you off?
a lot. And there's all these like rules I don't understand where like Steel will sell me only half of their pro hormone catalog, but not the other half. And then they say that that's because of high tech. But then high tech will sell me that half of their so then like that ties consumers up even more. And then I started getting frustrated. And I was like, look, guys, we're all made in the same building. Like, it's literally support who you want to support, vote with your feet, vote with your dollars. But Blackstone, high tech, Steel is all the same manufacturing arm, you know, like, and that's good because the technology is good. So just pick your poison. And they're like, wait, but no, that's not what they said. And why are they different prices then? Because it's a free market economy. You know, I could just, I don't want to keep ranting about this, but I don't know if I'm doing net good or what, but I really try. And I'm sure I sound like a broken record to some people, but I do think the whole, like, you know how Lowbliner bangs that drum, and I love Mark. Mark's a friend, but like, oh, don't take these things, just get TRT. Like, that's in some ways good advice, I think, if that's, you know, where you want to go. But then also I think it sort of disavows the fact that anyone could potentially take these things productively or safely. Like, both those things can be true. They're not opposite.
I've managed to create good content around the fact, like, testosterone boosters from the right companies with the right sources can work, but we need to understand that these are completely different conversations. For instance, we have content of Mike taking Beast's collaboration with the Rarely Chemist, and I think it increases his total testosterone by 150 points. It's not chump change. It's a significant difference. I think he's in his late 30s, already had a healthy amount. I think it went from like 600 to 750 or something like that. That's great. It is a significant change in testosterone. But people need to understand that 12 weeks of 150 different points up is not the same as having a level of 3,000 for 12 weeks. We need to understand that, like, this will probably increase your quality of life. It will probably increase the way that you live. You'll probably feel healthier, have a better libido, and perform a little better. But you're not putting on 35 pounds of lean mass in 12 weeks. As long as we have safe, understanding of that, then by all means, let's talk about it. But I don't want anyone to go this with the wrong understanding.
Yeah.
Like, I think, you know, like, we live in very politically contentious times, but if you ever find yourself in like a weird debate on the internet, a useful thing to Ben's point is to have the assailant define their terms up front. So Ben's talking about how you have to say, like, this is what's on the table with Beast test booster. I forget the name, but then this is what's on the table with pro hormones. This is what's on the table with, you know, south of the border supplements, and they're three different animals, and you can't like hop from one to the other or expect to move up in these categories. Like they're like step functions.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, neighbors.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like what I try to tell people with test boosters. I was like, you have the difference where one, you're injecting testosterone into your system, right? That's what you think. I was like, but what these things are designed to do is to put your body in a better testosterone producing environment, whether it be cortisol, whether it be, sleep, whatever that is. But that's not the same as artificially, injecting testosterone. But that's the correlation that people make. They're like, oh, I don't have to stick a needle in me, but I can get the same results from this, this group of pills. And it's just like, well,
results come with that risk, and you can't possibly expect that taking that pill is going to do the same thing. And I've actually gotten increasingly transparent. Like I talk about my TRT usage. I talk about, if you wanted to go through a clinic, I can help you figure it out and find a safe way to do it. But I also list all of the cautions that, like, I tried to come off for 4 months and did not go well. You got to understand this is the rest of your life. And it's not a big deal. You'll live a great rest of your life. Your quality of living will be much better than when you hit 35 and your testosterone tanks anyway. But people need to understand what they're doing. It's a choice that you need to make consciously.
Yeah, like I think all that's totally fair. Justin, in terms of like the mischaracterization of the category, like I'll pick on in a good way. Like one formula that I was impressed by recently off the top of my head, and I think Ben, you turned me on this company, was MFit has like peak force.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't know how much serum testosterone increase you're going to get. I would bet it would be, middling, sort of like Mike's analogous to that. But the way that makes you feel in the reduction of stress and the dopaminergic, like I almost think the quote unquote testosterone booster category is like a lifestyle category.
Yeah.
That term gets, I know that is inherently controversial, but I mean, in the literal sense of like, you're going to feel better, maybe have more energy, less risk of depression, less ups and downs in your energy levels, maybe deeper sleep, Jacob mentioned. Like those are reasonable reasons to take a testosterone booster. Wanting to gain 20 pounds of muscle in 6 weeks is not a reasonable reason to.
Well, and then that comes back to the way that the company's marketing it on the label too. Like the layman picks up this bottle and it looks aggressive as hell. It looks like a pro-hormone. It looks like a steroid. It's kind of up to us to explain that this is more of an optimizer, not a booster of sorts. So it's a tricky situation depending on who's picking up the bottle.
I think the companies that follow like what MFit did, where it's not just testosterone boosting, they also include performance enhancers or it's cortisol blocking or something else that is tangible and you can see real life results in that isn't just libido. I think that's important. But
I think one thing that Tim has always said that I try to do the same kind of thing is when people say like, what's the best fat burner? And you're like, it could be a protein shake. Right. Yeah. And that just like messes people like totally like, or someone will say like, what's the best mass builder? And I'm like, it could be a sleep aid. Like, so think about that. Right. Because, and then you can sort of like, and this is why, kind of thing. And I think that actually really helps people is when you can sort of flip the script a little bit and get them to think outside that one directional path that that people seem to be on sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think like finding your weakness in your regimen, whatever that is
supplementing it.
Supplementing it. But most of these people probably suck anyway. So.
Oh.
No, sure.
I had to stick it in. I think
that's going to become a call sign there.
It has to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, I train conjugate style, which is all based on being aware of what you're bad at and then attacking that relentlessly. And it takes a lot of self-awareness for people to figure that out, which is why Westside doesn't work for beginners because they are bad at everything. They don't know what they're worst at or what they need to improve. So for like most people, it takes a watchful eye from the outside one of us to see like, well, this is where it's lacking. But I think that a lot of people need that trial and error to figure it out.
Yep.
Yeah, Justin, one thing I think like we can reverse that maybe I got from you is like, I don't want to take off the table the experience of you figuring this out for yourself. That would be selfish of me, right? To assume like I think it's like, I don't know, Lane Norton maybe has made this analogy where it's like, why does he compete in natural bodybuilding? Which is like, I don't really care either way, but he's talked about how he always wanted to climb the mountain rather than take the helicopter up. And I'm sure he repurposed that from somewhere, but like I sort of reject that when it comes to like natural versus enhanced, because enhanced still has a huge mountain to climb to get to the pinnacle of the sport. But like, I think the analogy itself holds in this case, where it's like, we can all try to airlift anyone to the top of the mountain and drop them there, but they might just fall back down if they really learn how to solve problems in real time and pay attention to the biofeedback they're getting and like hinker a little bit. Overall, like usually the outcome is good, you know, and it's like those happy accidents, like you said, where you, with your aminos or whatever, where you're reminded how valuable it is, or maybe you added carbohydrate or something, and you know, and it was markedly different. You know, maybe it wasn't better, but you have to interpret that.
Love it. Well, we're running out on 2.5 hours here, and I'll be honest with you, I thought that people were going to start falling off. We never, like, everyone's still watching. This went really well. So, but I do need to take my dog out and move on with my night. So, Tim, at least from my side, thank you so much for being here. I think we all appreciate it. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been great, man, to talk to somebody with a, you know, very, very likeness perspective, and also to relate to a lot of situations. So I'd love to connect with you outside of the call and just chat sometime, just to learn from you.
Yeah, man. And like, look, guys, this is a treat. You know, I had a lot of fun. I would come back anytime. I really have admired each of you guys from afar, the different things that you do. You know, outside of what, and we all kind of trade stuff, like Justin with the like all that stuff. It's always to me my favorite when we all arrive at something sort of independently, but it's like in the same direction, you know. So that reinforces to me that we're on the right track, and that's what I wanted to finish with. After a heartfelt thank you, is Justin, I think I wrote on your Facebook group. If you go back to what I said about why I ultimately decided to partner with Steve and move to New York instead of take the easy road, which would be GNC corporate at the time, was I thought that maybe I could somehow roll the ball forward in the industry. I did not know what that looked like. Maybe it was a brand. Maybe it was to become an esteemed retailer or something. I don't even know what that looks like in the future, but I do know that, like, I think things like this call, things like you guys are, for, like we said it 100 times in this thing, net forces for good for the industry. And for so long, like, not I was on the outside, but I didn't have, what's the like Archimedes thing where if you give me a lever long enough, I can move the world. Like, we're not there yet. We don't have the Archimedes lever, but like the lever's getting longer and we keep leaning into it every day in the right direction. So it's really been a privilege. Like, you guys are like, back to that whole GNC analogy with the rebel group. We're like part of the rebel group in the industry, I think. And it's really rewarding for me to like have a platform or have access to platforms like this to help advance that conversation. So thank you guys.
I think we all have, knowing everyone's story decently well, we've all had that decision where it's like we could have gone the easy route. I know that we've all had the opportunity to go a little bit of maybe sit in the backseat a little bit and run some pool. But I know that we all here got together because we wanted to do something with the industry. So Justin's coined an incredible phrase over the last couple of months about looking at the scoreboard and all the things that we do. And I think that all four of us here can look back and say that we've put a couple points on the scoreboard for the good guys.
So well said, brother. Yeah, this was long overdue, Tim. I'm glad we got a chance to finally do this and give some people some long content. I know people appreciated it for sure, and I appreciate what you said for sure.
Hey, anytime, guys.
So, well, are you guys running the block party this year? I want to give you a second to shout out anything you guys might be doing.
Oh, yeah.
So it's entirely dependent on when the public gatherings, like restrictions get lifted. I think it's going to be when, not if. I do intend on putting some sort of showcase on the field. Like, it would feel weird to me. It's been like 6 years running. So my loose idea, I can sketch it out very quickly because I've been pitching it to everyone, trying to reiterate to my team and everything. We look something like this. We would admit a certain amount of people per hour with advanced passes they could purchase online for $10. It's always been a free event. If you choose to purchase anything from me that day, it could be 5 Bang drinks. It could be a Block Party t-shirt. It could be obviously be any product. You would then get the money back. It's actually just a deposit to hold your time slot. And we would admit a certain amount of people per hour in accordance with whatever phase or who the fuck knows. I mean, I'm so tired of this stuff, but you know, like if that's gone, then it would just be, you know, business as usual, but I don't know when that will, like, when that gets lifted and what that looks like. So I have a loose plan. It would still be hosted at our store. I think I can get away with something like that. We're very friendly with the local PD. They've always helped us pull off the events. So whatever like distancing guidelines that need to be in place, they can help us set that up. But that's what the loose plan looks like right now. I would almost say almost assuredly not August. I don't know if I could pull it off. September, but maybe more likely October at this point. But I would like to do it before the weather really turns bad. So that's where we stand.
Well,
Yeah, I know. Like, well, Ben was there last year. I know Jacob, you didn't get a chance to see it, but ties into what Jacob's got his 2-year anniversary party coming up, and I made the comment the other day. I said, I just want to go because I like to see just really cool stuff. Like, cool people do cool stuff and succeed. And I know like one thing that happens, like Tim, you're just a machine that day during the block party, but as an outside perspective, when you see something like the block party, I've never really seen anything like that, especially like in the supplement industry. There are so many people there, which is an amazing testament to what you do. And as I just sort of like found myself last year just kind of watching, because I'm like, this is pretty awesome. But sometimes you don't get a chance to appreciate because you're so busy. You're trying to make sure everyone's doing what they're doing. Jacob's going to go through the same thing. He's going to struggle between trying to appreciate sort of what's happening in the moment, all the work, but also you have
it's
so
going to
many
be a blast, man.
So the block party was a huge example of that. And I know I would be there. I know Lila asks me every day to ask you, like, she's like, should I keep bothering Tim to ask when it is? I was like, he'll let you know when it is.
Well, our wonderful governance here just took gyms off the ticket. And then I think it's similar in New Jersey, Ben, but their gyms are now suing. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how this all resolves. But at some point, I think that's maybe what a solution would look like. But yes, Jacob, I want to say it's going to be the best feeling in the world at 11 p.m. that night. Just hang in there.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's it started out as a party plan, and then it kind of more and more things start to pop up, and I'm like, okay, this is happening. But rest assured, when everything does restrict, I am definitely coming up to the next block party, just to get involved and be hang out with all you guys and be there. So.
Well, I do want to propose, because next weekend we're trying to do something together at Jacob's event, a little bit of a service podcast there. If we do find ourselves all in the Big Apple, we should try to make some content together. The amount of content that I created with Tim last year was hilarious. Gronk showed up for one of the interviews. It was just wild. So
I didn't even know that. Steve was like, "Oh yeah, like that got dropped into my lap." Like people think that was like, in hindsight, it was good that we didn't. Advertise that, because it would have been like impossible, but that was
yeah. So well, I hope we all can end up at that then when it happens, not if. And we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, guys, we could even train if circumstances permit. We could do a lot of content. So I know people.
That's what we're doing. Yeah,
they love the like, this is all fun and conceptual, and I think really rewarding. But they love to see like the actual practical implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, man. I'm going to end the stream now, and then we can talk about all the juicy stuff when everyone's not watching anymore.